Think New York's intimidating? Not anymore, and this ultimate guide will cover every possible scam, tourist trap, and common mistake that travelers run into, so you can skip the headaches and make the most of your NYC adventure. Let's dive in. You know about the fake merchandise handbags that you can buy all over Canal Street, but there's a new wrinkle to this that has been making headlines, and that's knockoff Apple products. I'm talking about AirPods Pro, AirPods Max. They're selling for hundreds of dollars off the retail price all over Canal Street. It sounds too good to be true. The New York Post even ran an undercover operation showing how they were fakes. The instructions were in different languages. Best case scenario, they're gonna work and be awful quality. Worst case, these AirPods won't even function. What's crazy is you won't just see this occurring on Canal Street. I've seen it all over Manhattan. I've seen sellers even in Brooklyn on Fifth Ave, near where I live, which is not a touristy area at all. And clearly, people are still falling for this, otherwise they wouldn't be out in such high numbers. Look, I'm a huge fan of cheap eats, but in New York, you definitely do not want to buy cheap electronics. Something else to keep in mind if you buy one of these Apple knockoffs, there is a no refund policy. Good luck finding the seller that you bought from. So remember that, always buy directly from the retailer or try to get a better price online with a reputable website. This next new scam is occurring in one of New York's most touristy locations, Central Park, so listen closely. Especially my women watching, as that's who the prime target of this has been. And how it works is a group of teens will approach you and ask for a donation for their sports team. But instead of cash, they'll ask for Zelle or Venmo payment, the money transferring apps on your cell phone. Then they convince you to hand your phone to them saying they'll type in their email. All seems good until you check the transaction and realize these guys just milked you for thousands of dollars. Yes, they took a combined $4,000 from 4 victims already. This happens mostly at Sheep's Meadow, which is the most popular part of Central Park. Where to begin? The most obvious thing here is never to hand your phone to a stranger for any reason whatsoever. This is even worse than giving somebody your wallet for a donation. It's like giving them the keys to your bank vault. They can go absolutely wild, and there's no guarantee that you're gonna get your money back. A former Miss New York even got taken by this. Apparently she was groggy from having her wisdom teeth removed and was targeted at Madison Square Park. I'd be on guard for anyone who approaches you asking for a donation, and we'll tell you about a classic con that uses this very same tactic later on in the video. Also, there's a variation on this where instead of a donation for a team, it's selling candy. Be aware out there. This next new scam has many variations. Pay attention even if you don't live in New York, because it can happen anywhere in the US, but it involves unpaid parking tickets. The scammers will send a text that says the recipient has an unpaid parking ticket in the city or a toll fee to pay. I was even targeted for this myself. I got a text message about an unpaid toll. I had recently rented a car, so for a second, I thought it was real, but no. It's a phishing site that once you input your credit card information, will put that into the hands of hackers. I've also myself received texts about mail that hasn't been picked up by the USPS, and they're charging you a fee to hold it. There's a lot of variations on it. Be very careful about any text message you get, period, asking about payment. These scams are getting sophisticated, and I always seem to get them right as I wake up in the morning. So one of these days, I may even fall for it. There's an interesting hustle right now being reported on Reddit that I've been curious about for a really long time, and it's about getting overcharged at bodegas or delis. What's a scam you run into often in the city? Today, a bodega owner tried to charge me $6 for a can of Diet Coke and then said, "Oh, sorry, my mistake," when I caught it. Dude tried to charge $15 for a bacon, egg, and cheese and got real flustered when I went, "Oh, no worries, I live here. I'll just go to the bodega down the block that has them for $6. Years ago, something like this actually happened to me. Granted, I had a few drinks in my system, I was out at night in the village, I ordered a bagel, and the guy at the bodega quoted me some wild price, and I said, "Wait, what was that again?" And then he gave me the real price. Look, most people that work at delis and bodegas are very honest, but every once in a while, the price listed is not the price you are actually gonna be quoted. So when in doubt at a bodega, ask them for each individual price if you're getting a bunch of items. Usually there's price tags on them anyway. It's sad that there are a few dishonest owners or staff out there who are making everybody else look bad. And we have talked time and time again about another variation on this, and that is getting ripped off by street food carts. Now, how it works is if the price is not listed, let's say for a hot dog vendor, and you order all the food, some dishonest vendors are gonna charge you whatever they think they can get away with. And I've heard stories of my viewers getting charged $15, $20 for a hot dog. So what you have to do is if the prices are not listed, and they should be listed on every street food cart, ask for them in advance. Heck, the other day, I was by Prospect Park and a hot dog vendor tried charging me $4 for a water. It happens still. Battery Park is the gateway to the Statue of Liberty, and there are plenty of scams to be on the lookout for here, starting from when you walk up the subway steps. You'll get asked if you're going to the Statue of Liberty. This has gotten so out of hand that there's even signs here reminding you illegal ticket vendors are selling deceptive tickets that cannot access the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island. Illegal ticket vendors cannot upgrade Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island tickets. Statue City Cruises is the only authorized boat to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. To save yourself a massive headache, pre-book your Statue of Liberty tickets on the City Cruises website. That way, when you arrive here, you don't have to worry about anything or buy tickets that may not actually get you to the Statue of Liberty or charge you too much money. And to go one step further, book access to the crown of the statue if you can, because that is an unforgettable experience. And remember to steer clear of any vendors who try to sell you better tickets to get to the statue or Ellis Island. In fact, a few years ago, actor Alec Baldwin even fell for this, buying 4 tickets that sent him to New Jersey. And he's from New York, and he still fell for this. And one more reminder, the Staten Island Ferry is free. You do not need tickets to board it and get a great view of the Statue of Liberty. There was a story a few years ago about somebody who was selling tickets to the Staten Island Ferry for $200, and tourists fell for it. Never ever buy tickets for the Staten Island Ferry. This is something I never thought I'd be discussing, but here we are. The city has been warning people about scams involving artificial intelligence. And these are typically some kind of voice cloning, pretending to be a loved one. In one instance, a mom got a call from her daughter who's 14 and said she got arrested and would have to pay cash to bail her out. It was her daughter's voice. It was accurate. Luckily, her daughter did eventually call her for real. They're not super common yet, but I think over time they could be. And these are the signs the city mentioned you need to be on the lookout for this kind of AI cloning scam. You're contacted out of the blue, you're pressured to act immediately with no time to think, the caller is urgently requesting money, usually through a wire transfer, gift card, payment app, or crypto. These methods of payment make it nearly impossible to get a refund once you've been scammed. The caller is requesting personal or private information from you. You're told to keep the caller's request a secret. Well, we talked about getting weird text messages. Now you gotta be on the lookout for weird phone calls as well. And if you're in doubt, you could always ask the AI clone a personal question that they probably won't know the answer to if you put them on the spot. We have a whole video dedicated to surviving your arrival to JFK Airport, but there's 2 airport scams you really need to be on the lookout for. The first is anyone approaching you outside the taxi line offering you a lift to the city. The problem here is even if they offer you a better rate, once your luggage is in their trunk, you are at their mercy. They're not registered by anyone or insured. Either wait in the taxi line or use a rideshare service like Uber, Lyft, or Revel, and use this code here to get 70% off your first Revel ride if you're interested, and those are all electronic cars. The other scam is even sneakier. I've seen it with my own eyes. Someone holding an Uber sign, they'll ask if you were calling an Uber and try to negotiate a high rate with you without using the app. Remember, Ubers can only be called from the app on your phone. These are not real Uber drivers. We'll call this the Times Square trifecta, although you could run into any of these in different locations around the city. The most classic scams in New York, the fake monks. They'll approach you and offer you either a bracelet or some cheap trinket, then show you a guest book and photos of the Buddhist temple they're raising money for. This temple does not exist. They are not real monks. Don't even engage. The CD guys. I really feel like the CD guys have duped so many tourists because every time I mention them, the comments are full of stories. Here's how it works. These would-be rappers usually travel in packs and try to hand you a CD. If you accept it, they'll aggressively ask you for a tip. Or if they engage you in conversation, they'll ask for your name and autograph the CD. Either way, expect to be really pressured to hand over some cash. I've heard many stories about how these CDs are blank. The costume characters. This is all over Times Square. Mickey Mouse, Spider-Man, the Hulk. Pose for a photo with them and expect each and every one of them to pester you for a big tip. Be extra careful if your kids run up to them and want a photo because after you take that picture, they will get aggressive for money. If you must take a photo with them, set a price first. The dropped food, glass, medicine scam. This is the oldest con in the book, and yes, it still occurs even in 2024. How it works is the crook will walk up to you, bump into you, and then whatever falls on the ground, accuse you of breaking it. They'll then demand payment on the spot or have you walk to an ATM with them to get cash. I know someone personally who had this happen to them with a bottle of malt liquor, and they didn't know any better and paid the guy. Heck, there was even one con artist in the village who did this so frequently, they posted his photo on the streets. It was honestly like a rite of passage living near Bleecker Street. He tried it on my wife with French fries, but she had watched my videos and knew that he was full of it. Then, months later, he even tried it on me. My wife was with me, we just laughed, and he probably scooped up those French fries and kept walking, looking for somebody else to trick. Although I do wonder how much he would have charged me for those fries. If anybody says you caused them to drop something, keep on walking, they won't follow you. The I need money hustle. I have waxed poetic about people approaching you near any of the bus or train terminals, asking you for money to get to Buffalo just this once. And of course, the next day, they'll be there again, asking for money to some other destination. And I've even seen a variation of this by the air train at JFK Airport on the elevator when you're stuck with them and you can't run away to say no. Of course, you can say no. A new one I've been hearing about is somebody standing outside of a bodega and they'll ask you for money for baby formula for their sick child. Now, in New York, if anyone asks you for money for any reason on the street, they are not going to be using it for said purpose. Trust me. 3-card Monte and shell games. This is the kind of thing you see in the movies, but I swear it has made a comeback in New York after COVID. I didn't even believe it until I saw a game occurring near Bryant Park last year during the Christmas season. A small crowd will form, they're all in on it, they'll lull you into thinking you can win some money, and you may win a little until you put a big bet down and lose it all. Even if you can read their slate of hand and pick the right card, one of the guys in on it will jump in, double their bet, pick the other card, giving their money right back to the house. It is literally impossible to win, so don't even try. Visiting New York can be intimidating for first-timers, and there's certain unspoken rules and customs that newbies tend to break many times without realizing it. In this video, we'll share all of them and even a few bonuses so your next trip here is free from any embarrassing or possibly expensive mistakes. As a tourist, you are far more likely to get hit by a bike than you are by a car. In my 13 years living in New York, I have never come close to being hit by a car, and 2 or 3 times I almost got hit by a bike, and I wasn't even walking in the bike lane. Always be aware of where the bike lanes are in the city because the cyclists already have a chip on their shoulder for so many cars and pedestrians ignoring this. If you stand here and try to take a photo or just don't pay attention to it, best case scenario, you're gonna get a warm New York City welcome and learn a few new curse words. Worst case scenario, you are gonna get crashed into and it is gonna be very painful. And this video is not sponsored by any kind of travel insurance, so you just don't wanna get into that. So sometimes it's a little bit tricky to find, but the easiest way to find the bike lane is to look down like this and you can see it, or better yet, see where all the cyclists are heading. But never ever stand in the middle of this. This drives locals crazier than anything and is one of the main reasons they love to avoid the Times Square area, and that's traffic flow and how to walk properly on a congested city street. Now this actually takes a little bit of effort if, let's say, you have 4 people in your group. What you don't want to do is walk all 4 across because you are going to be stopping all the people behind you from walking around. You need to be in groups of 2 maximum, And right now, Times Square is not that busy because it's February, but if you're here during a peak period, you will understand exactly what I mean. And this advice goes for all of New York. And what you never ever want to do is stop in the middle of the sidewalk to take a photo or to look for directions. That is the quickest way to get New Yorkers angry at you. And later on in this video, we're gonna talk about some similar concepts underground on the subway. I'm gonna share a firsthand experience that occurred about a month ago when I went to MJ the Musical, and this is about Broadway etiquette. Now, I was surrounded by many tourists, and halfway through the show, there were about 2 teens sitting next to Adriana and I, and they started to play with their phones in the middle of the show. And let me tell you, when it's super dark in a theater and somebody's looking at their phone, it is completely distracting and disrespectful. And shame on those parents for not realizing what was going on. The big unspoken rule here is do not play with your phone during a Broadway show. And if you're a parent, make sure that your children have the attention span to sit through an entire performance or find out if there's an intermission or not to avoid situations like that. And if you need even more Broadway tips and tricks, check out the video we shot with a Broadway insider giving you the lowdown. Carmine's Fine Italian Dining, which brings me to tipping, which is something that so many tourists get frustrated with visiting New York. It is such a source of complaint that I've even dedicated an entire video to this foreign American concept of tipping. But the #1 spot I hear about tourists having problems is not even at restaurants, it's at bars, because you are dealing directly with the bartender, and if you do not leave a tip for your drink, you're gonna hear about it. My general rule of thumb is tip $1 per drink, some say $2 per cocktail. The bartender will be much nicer to you as well. A simple rule for restaurants, tip 20% of the pre-tax total on the bill, assuming your service was good enough. You know, look, I understand the frustration out there because in many other countries, servers are paid living wages, but in the United States, they live off of tips. And while I might not personally be a fan of it, I still adhere to it because when you visit another city, another country, you have to do as the locals do. Something brand new in New York, if you are ordering Uber Eats or DoorDash delivery to your hotel, they have pretty much cut out tipping. This is a recent change where they've just raised fees. Now they have a screen where they only suggest a $1, $2, or $3 tip after the order has been delivered. And I know many New Yorkers now who just don't tip anymore on these apps because the drivers are getting $30 an hour and the fees, well, they've gone up. The weather, every New Yorker's favorite topic. Take it from me as somebody that films outdoors all the time and relies on weather reports daily to know when to film. The weather in New York City is extremely volatile. First of all, Manhattan, you are never far from the water, so you could catch yourself walking on a street that just has a crazy amount of wind and it'll feel 10 to 15 degrees cooler. So I'd say between November even to April, sometimes even into May, having a light jacket with you, a sweater, always a good idea. Another thing is the rain. I try my hardest not to film when it's raining. Even last week, at the last minute, rain popped up into the forecast and we had some of it for about 2 to 3 hours and I was completely unprepared. Having an umbrella with you at all times, never a bad idea. An unspoken rule that every New Yorker knows so well, many times from bad experiences, is never accept anything when you're walking, especially in Midtown Manhattan. This is how the majority of the scams that we've covered on this channel occur. Don't say yes to a monk handing you a bracelet, to somebody handing you a CD, to a pamphlet, to somebody holding a clipboard. Just keep your eyes locked ahead, avert your gaze. That's the best advice I can give anybody in New York. And if you need even more advice on avoiding scams in the city, watch the whole video we have dedicated to it. Supporting local businesses. I know how easy it is when you travel to go to franchises like Dunkin' Donuts behind me to grab a coffee when you're in a rush, rather than going to one of the local street carts and getting a coffee from a vendor that really relies on the income more. Being a New Yorker, and I think visiting New York, is all about supporting small local businesses like that, and I encourage you to go out of your way to do so. And supporting local businesses is definitely something that'll really make your trip to New York a lot more memorable. In some cultures, it's just commonplace for locals to stare at you. Well, in New York,
It is the complete opposite. Minding your own business is something that native New Yorkers especially know all about. So if you see somebody acting erratic, doing weird things, don't stare, don't point at them, just don't get involved. Because if you look at somebody, it could be a trigger for a confrontation, or worse, a signal that you even want to fight. So make sure that you do not stare at strangers here, and don't get involved in conflict here unless you absolutely have no other choice. And don't take a picture with a Hulk and expect him to not charge you 20 bucks for it. Don't take an Uber or a taxi when you can take the subway to get there faster. And don't take the subway when it's quicker and easier to walk. This unspoken rule is broken all the time. Now, I would say if you're considering taking an Uber or a taxi between the hours of 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's almost always faster to take the subway inside of Manhattan, and a lot cheaper. Let me give you a good example. If I'm at Grand Central and I want to get down to Battery Park, you can take the Express 405 and get there in 13 minutes, 5 stops. That same Uber ride is gonna take you 25 minutes, probably more with traffic, and cost you $30 to $40 versus the $2.90 you would pay taking the subway. Manhattan is so well connected by subway that this example holds true in almost any way you could think of between Midtown to Lower Manhattan. And when it comes to walking during peak hours when traffic is terrible, don't even think about hailing a taxi. And even sometimes waiting for the subway could be 10 minutes or more. If it's crowded, walking down the steps is all gonna eat up your time. And if you could just walk 15 to 20 minutes, I always advise walking, unless the weather's bad. And since you're gonna be riding the subway underground, there's some unspoken rules we definitely have to go over. Let me repeat this for the 10th time on the channel. You do not need to buy a Metro card anymore. It is now official. Even at JFK Airport, the AirTrain supports OmniPay, which is contactless payment from your phone or even from a card with a chip. Now, my wife's brother was visiting from Mexico recently, and he was asking me all about this, and I said, as long as you have this enabled in any way, shape, or form, a Metro card is completely useless to you right now. All you need to do is tap your phone or tap your card and you're in. Buying a Metro card, I think it's just an extra step right now. Look, you don't need a Metro card. The Metro card machines even tell you don't need a Metro card anymore. Right from the horse's mouth, okay? So when you're going up an escalator in a subway station in the city, always stay to the right, because if people are in a rush, they're late for a meeting, they're late for court, I don't know what, they want this lane here open. Do not stand to the left unless you are walking quickly. Another unspoken rule broken all the time, and it's really just courtesy, is when people are getting out of the subway, do not block the doors. Stand to the side, let them exit, and then go in. And you would be surprised how often I see people breaking this simple rule, even locals. The subway intercom is likely gonna sound like a toddler babbling right when you need it most, or the train track noise like this is gonna make it impossible to hear what the next stop is. Always be paying attention to how many stops you have left if you don't know the city well. Even a few weeks ago, I missed my stop because I zoned out. It happens to everybody. Don't rely on the conductor's voice
34th Street.
unless it's clear like that. If the subway is super crowded during rush hour, one advanced tactic is what I'll call pre-walking, is when your station is approaching, standing up and moving towards the door. Because if you wait till the last second, you could run into a sea of people flooding onto the train right as you want to get out. So if you have the time, get up right as your stop is approaching on a busy, busy train. Respecting neighborhoods, and this goes beyond the obvious, like not littering. I'm also talking about your volume and your noise if you're going out at night and going to bars. Now, I used to live at that apartment right there in Greenwich Village for almost a decade, and I can tell you that on weekends, the volume from outside was enough to wake you up unless you had a fan or white noise going, and people would sometimes even open up our garbage area to use the bathroom. That being said, always paying attention when you're out and not being super noisy on the street late at night is going to be very considerate of you when there's people sleeping who have to go to work the next day. Another unspoken rule is if you are going to celebrity houses or even places where celebrities used to live, like Richard Gere's old townhouse behind me, which sold for over $10 million in 2007. If you're a huge Richard Gere fan, you can take a photo of it, that's fine, but don't peer into the windows, don't Don't open the gate, don't stand on their stoops. Realize that people live here and be respectful of that. Richard Gere lived there, Sandra Bullock, Anne Wintour from Vogue is somewhere here. I lived on the poor side of the street. Let's talk fast serve restaurant etiquette, and I'm actually standing in front of my old deli here in the Village. If you go to a deli, a bodega, a pizza spot, and there's a long line, make sure you know your order before you get to the front. Step out of line if you have to, because if you're gonna be asking the worker 50 questions while there's 30 hungry construction workers behind you, you're gonna be in for some trouble. That is one thing, respecting people's time. If it's busy, check the menu first. I'm gonna throw one more bonus tip out there. If you're at a small casual eatery, let's give an example, Fuzhou Cuisine in Chinatown. They don't have a ton of tables and they're always super busy. What you don't wanna do is sit there after your meal for 20 minutes just chatting if people are waiting for tables. If you're at a finer dining establishment, take your time. They'll let you know if they need the table. But if you're at a small casual place, see if people are waiting for tables and don't sit there and chat for 30 minutes after. And this is something that goes against a lot of cultures. I know even my wife in Mexico loves to do what's called sobremesa after her meal, sit there and chat. You can't do it at all New York eateries, especially popular ones where people need the tables. If you're not from the US, especially Latin America or Europe, listen closely. A lot of tourists run into issues with ordering alcohol. Now, one mistake they make is not bringing ID with them if they look anything under 30. I even sometimes get ID'd. If you go to a restaurant and you order a beer, have either your local ID with you or your passport, just in case. And that advice goes for bars and clubs. Almost every bar in the city, IDs, no matter how old you look. Now, something cool about New York versus where I grew up in northern New Jersey is you can buy beer at CVS, you can buy beer at bodegas, you can buy beer at delis. And at a lot of them, you can even buy single beers from a six-pack, which isn't that common everywhere else in the US.
New York is one of the most expensive destinations on the planet. It's very easy to spend here and very hard to keep your wallet closed. In this video, I'll share the 15 ways tourists keep wasting their money and how to avoid these common mistakes. Take some notes. Here we go. We're gonna start with something that shocks many of my foreign viewers. In fact, it's so common that I even tend to overspend on this myself. That's portion size of the food here. Many times you'll order food at restaurants and come to the realization that this is way too much food for one person. Perhaps we should have ordered less. With most Airbnbs being banned, you probably don't have a full-size fridge in your hotel and may end up throwing out or just wasting money on a ton of food here. I was out for my birthday just last week with Adriana and my son, and we ordered a large pie at an Italian restaurant, which was way too much for us. The portions here are no joke, but living here, we have a fridge, so it's not a problem. It never hurts to ask your waiter, hey, is this better for sharing? How big is the portion? They're gonna be honest with you. And worst case, you can always order more food rather than stuffing yourself needlessly. The most common type of restaurant I see an issue with food portion size are the Jewish delis, the Katz's and the Sarge's, when you order 2 sandwiches and realize this could have been enough. But then again, that's even more reason to walk around the city, and you'll do plenty of walking when you visit here. Arriving to New York and departing the city from the area airports is one of the most common ways I see my tourists overspending. I used to follow these Facebook groups, and so many of them would comment about these expensive car services doing pickup, which is great if you have a huge group and a ton of luggage or small children, but many people skip out on some easy, low-cost options of getting to Manhattan. Many times these are faster too because of traffic. Let's look at some comments you all sent me. Andrew and Kyla here. We always fly into LaGuardia, and we used to pay for a taxi to our hotel in Long Island City. The Q70 bus takes us to an MTA station that we use to take the subway the rest of the way. The method is essentially free. We buy unlimited 7-day subway passes and faster than a taxi due to the bus lanes from the airport. Thank you, Andrew and Kyla, for a great point. At LaGuardia Airport, there is a free bus that you can take, which will put you into the New York City subway system at Jackson Heights, and from there, it's just a subway swipe to get around the city. A great option. Although keep this in mind, LaGuardia does have the best prices to get to Midtown Manhattan, as it is the closest airport to there. Just got back, used the air train and LIRR for the first time and saved loads over our usual yellow cab. Less than half the price and half the time. Be brave, people. Of all the tips I've ever shared on this channel, the advice about taking the Long Island Railroad from JFK Airport to Midtown is the one I constantly hear was the most helpful. Because it's a no-brainer. For $5, you can get direct into Penn Station or into Grand Central in about 20 minutes. Now, the only caveat here is, again, if you have a ton of luggage, or if it's late at night, you're super tired, you don't want to deal with it, fine, spend the extra money on the Uber, the Revel, the car service, whatever that may be. If you want to specifically find out how it's done, watch our video on scams to avoid at the airport. We break down step by step how to get from JFK to Midtown. Buying anything from the gift shops between 8th and 5th Ave in Central Park South and 34th Street. I can't vouch for the gift shop prices at all stores in Midtown, but generally speaking, those ones do have the highest prices for obvious reasons. My wife and I, when we need souvenirs for visitors, when we're going abroad and we want to bring some New York City trinkets, we always shop on Canal Street near Chinatown. So I would say when you're going to Chinatown, doing a little cheap eats crawl, save a little time for some souvenir shopping, and you will definitely get the best prices. And be wary of the knockoff goods and electronics. We just discussed those on my latest scam video. I do not recommend you purchase any of that stuff. Taking Ubers and taxis everywhere, a common way to overspend. Oof. One trip years ago, my friend was afraid to take the subway, so we took Ubers everywhere. Holy F, that added up. I put my foot down when we were in Chinatown, and we needed to head up to a Yankee game. That subway trip was smooth. Not using the subway the first days due to safety concerns. The subway was safe, fast, and easy to use. Wish I had used the subway more, spent way too much on Ubers and taxis. This is a very common occurrence. Tourists watch the news, they hear about some subway violence, and they vow never to set foot underground, and I just think that's a big mistake. You are gonna be forced to spend a fortune on Ubers and taxis. If you're taking those cars during normal business hours within Manhattan, the subway is almost always quicker to the main attractions. Manhattan is extremely connected by subway lines. If you're concerned about your safety and not familiar with the city, I'd recommend not taking the subway after 11 p.m. when there's a lot less people until the morning rush hour. You could also find the indication board, also known as the zebra board, so you know where the subway conductor is sitting for a little added safety, or just try to sit in more crowded subway cars. But don't discount the subway as a transportation method. It's gonna save you time, and it's definitely gonna save you money. Insisting on a meal with a view. Restaurants near Times Square or other tourist attractions. We purposely went to a restaurant with a view of Times Square so we could see it without being in it. Overpriced for meh food. We were paying for the view, but just a heads up, folks, we would rather spend that money on a really great dinner where the food was amazing, or just get a cocktail or dessert at a place like that and save the big dollars for elsewhere. I get this, you want that magical rooftop dining experience. Well, I've got news for you. New York City is more well known for rooftop bars, not rooftop restaurants. And if you're ordering food at a restaurant on a rooftop, the odds are very strong that the food is gonna be mediocre, because the food doesn't have to be good. People are there for the view, not for the food. So if you are looking for amazing food in New York, you'll find it at plenty of places without great views. And then if you must go to a rooftop, well, you can go to one of the 5 observation decks, or better yet, go to Beast and Butterflies on the rooftop of the M Social Hotel. I just went back there after many months, and I can see why so many of my viewers have tagged me there. That view is incredible of Times Square. I enjoyed my $9 Brooklyn Lager so much. They also allow children up there. Definitely one to keep in mind. One of my favorite topics, tipping. I love New York and spending, and yes, I definitely waste and overspend, but that's part of the experience. What I find really annoying is tipping for anything and everything, and tips being added to bills without even knowing it. I'm all for tipping for a service that I asked for. I just don't like the tipping culture. It makes me feel all interactions with people are false, and all they want is your money. I mean, it does feel that way sometimes, that all people in New York want is your money, but tipping is just something you have to accept here. I understand a lot of my viewers coming from Europe, from the UK, are not fans of the New York tipping system, but it is something that the locals deal with, and it's something you just have to accept. As far as overspending on this, I want to remind you that many tourist locations will give auto gratuities on your bill of 18 or 20%, in which case it's fine to leave the bill alone. Where you'd be in danger of overspending here is 1, leaving an additional tip on top of the auto gratuity, which is so easy to do if you don't read the check closely. 2, tipping too much on top of the overall bill. I personally tip 20% of the pre-tax total, not post-tax. Also, many times restaurants with terminals have gratuity options starting at 20%, going up to 30%, and you may feel pressured to leave a lot because the waiter's standing in front of you, but don't. And if you're more curious about the tipping culture in New York, I did an entire video dedicated to that subject. We're about to talk about one of New York's most common scams. Shop around when going to hot dog carts or any cart, TBH. One on one corner will sell a bottle of drink for $5, whilst the next down the block will sell the same bottle for $3. TBH, people say NYC is expensive, but we started splurging towards the end of our trip this year. Shop wisely. Now, I just saw a video of a first-time tourist spending $10 on a hot dog, and we have harped on this topic time and time again, and we're gonna continue to harp on it, and that is when you go to any street food cart, any vendor, and the prices are not listed, ask for the price before you order, okay? Because if you don't, and they get a sense that you're not from here, they may charge you whatever they want. I've seen vendors in Midtown selling water bottles for $5 when they should be $2, and if you're curious what a hot dog should actually cost you, around $3. I'm not trying to knock all the street food vendors in New York because most of them are honest, but I've heard about some deceptive practices in the Times Square area and around Central Park, so be careful. The hop-on, hop-off buses, these are widespread in every major city. I was never into these. I think for many people, they're not worth the money, which is what, 50 to 60 bucks a person. New York's the kind of city you need to experience walking. If you're on a bus, you're not gonna interact with any locals. There's gonna be no chance for you to wander into a shop or have a different experience than all the other tourists. And if it's super hot, super cold, raining, snowing, you may not wanna ride them. The touristy parts of New York are actually pretty compact. You can see most of the major sites of Manhattan in 3 full days if you plan your time properly. These buses just scratch the surface. There are exceptions. If you're a person with a disability that affects your mobility, they're great because sadly not every subway station is accessible. Or if you're traveling with the elderly, these could be a viable option. Otherwise, I would recommend a walking tour or just wandering neighborhoods versus the hop-on, hop-off buses. Paying full price for Broadway tickets. There are so many ways to save money on Broadway tickets that many tourists completely overlook. The last thing you want to do is just show up at a theater and buy tickets the day of. Many travelers know about lining up at the TKTS booth the day of a show to get good discounts, and yes, this is a tried and true method. There's also Broadway lotteries you can enter. Many are digital these days. This website puts the most popular ones together. Keep in mind there's typically a limit of only 2 tickets per entry for this. You can also aim to see the less popular shows, which many times on sites like StubHub have cheaper prices on the secondary market. But if you must see the hottest show during the Christmas season, there's almost no way around spending the kind of money that you would for a fancy steak dinner for it. Use some of those discount methods. And if you want to find out about more common mistakes that tourists make when they visit Broadway, check out this video we shot with a Broadway lifer. There are some incredible tips on here. Misusing attraction passes. I'm not gonna call attraction passes a waste of money if you use them correctly. Let's take a step back. I'm referring to the passes that give you access to multiple observation decks, museums, and attractions in one day or over the course of a few days. There's a few companies that sell them. If you do the math, you can save money. I do have issues with them. And the biggest is you're doing all the touristy stuff and having the same trip as everyone else. Some people don't mind that, and I respect it. The problem comes when you go buy an all-inclusive pass for 3 days for $259 and you don't go hopping around nonstop. My point is, figure out what you want to see, do the math, and see if it makes sense to buy one of the attraction passes. I don't think any tourist needs more than 1 observation deck on a trip. The queues can be long, and if the weather sucks, then you may not even have an enjoyable experience at it. Not checking restaurant prices before being seated. A restaurant might look nice from the outside, but unless you've read reviews or someone recommended it to you, take a look at the menu, a good look at the menu before walking in. Because once you're settled in at your table, the waiter has brought your water and bread already. It could be just a little awkward if there's some sticker shock, which is very common in New York, where the price of eating can be high, quite high. Expensive roaming charges. Don't just show up to New York without some kind of plan for your cell phone. If I were to fly to almost any country, my service Verizon would charge me a set roaming fee per day. Either check if your local carrier offers a cheap roaming option to the US, or better yet, use an eSIM, which you can install on your phone before you arrive. I've had great success with Olafly, who has partnered with us on the channel before. If you want to check out their plans with a 5% coupon code, see the link in the description, or use this QR code right here. I used Olafly all over Europe, had nothing but good experiences. Overpriced hotel stays. This one is pretty straightforward. If you want to book a hotel near Times Square during the holiday season, you will spend $400 to $700 a night, and there's very little you can do about it. Two ways to lessen the burden of hotel stays. One is to stay outside of the Midtown Manhattan bubble. Even lower Manhattan has better prices, but better yet, check downtown Brooklyn, check Long Island City, Queens, check even closer to the airport in Flushing. Number two, come during a non-peak period. Anywhere from January 10th to April 1st will likely get you a better price, and the tourist sites will be way less crowded too. And our last few winters have been pretty mild, so you could get lucky. This is a really good one. Eating out at every meal. Sometimes it's nice to just buy something from the supermarket and eat it in the park. While you may see me eating out all the time in the channel, that's because we're filming content and I need exciting stuff for you guys. But in truth, I don't go out to eat every day, maybe once or twice a week when I'm not filming. That's because eating out nonstop in New York will put a dent in your wallet faster than almost anything. If you can find a Trader Joe's or even a deli, a bodega, go buy a salad or a sandwich and sit at one of the city's many parks for breakfast or lunch once in a while. We actually do have a great culture of quick-serve, grab-and-go food spots at pretty reasonable prices. A few slices of pizza work equally well, or have the most New York breakfast possible, walk into a bodega and order a bacon, egg, and cheese, salt, pepper, ketchup. Do it just like that, and they might even think you live here. Carriage rides in Central Park. I am not a fan of these at all. There's been some bad stories out there about some of the suffering of the horses, and it's about $65 for 20 minutes, not counting tip. Do an hour, and you're basically paying your airfare here. I think a better deal would be booking a pedicab in advance. Now, there's some really popular ones. You can read the reviews. I hear about this Frankie Legs guy all the time. He's probably worth investigating. And don't ever jump blindly onto a pedicab because they charge between $3 to $9 a minute. Do the math on that for a 30-minute ride. And if you don't like any of those options, there's plenty of much cheaper walking tours out there. Is New York losing its magic for tourists? We'll talk about the shocking rise in crime at a popular tourist spot, jaw-dropping hotel prices, and a growing list of everyday struggles. Is New York still worth the trip? Let's discuss. One indisputable fact about visiting this city in 2024 and going forward is the rising cost of everything, starting with your hotel room. The New York Times just came out with a story about why NYC hotel rooms are so expensive right now. The average daily rate for a hotel stay in New York increased to $301 in 2023. I can only imagine where they're at in 2024, and there's so many factors involved, but the big three that this article cites are migrant shelters, the loss of Airbnb short-term rentals, and the decline in new hotel construction. Let's start with hotels being converted into migrant shelters, which is good business for many hotels. About 135 of the city's roughly 680 hotels entered the shelter program, with many congregated in Midtown Manhattan, Long Island City and Queens, and near Kennedy International Airport, all traditional magnets for tourists. Participating hotels are paid up to $185 a night per room according to the city. Not a single one is converted back into a traditional hotel. The use of city hotels for migrants represents a loss of 16,532 hotel rooms, leaving 121,000 rooms for travelers. That's 2,812 fewer hotel rooms than existed in the period just before the pandemic, a shortage that is being acutely felt. I mean, this is simple supply and demand. Less supply, more demand, prices are definitely gonna go up. Since migrants are mostly taking up the city's more affordable hotels, mid-market tourists are most likely to see the steepest increase in prices. I really believe it's enabled 2 and 2.5 star hotels to be a little bit more emboldened to take advantage of the situation and charge prices that perhaps they otherwise wouldn't be able to. Now, it would be unfair to completely blame the migrant crisis for the increase in hotel room prices. There's another factor that's definitely at play, and that's almost the complete ban of Airbnbs for short-term stays in New York. The number of Airbnb listings in New York City for stays under 30 days plummeted by 83% to just 3,705 apartments in March 2024, down from 22,247 in August 2023. Now, according to Mayor Adams, the city is just so popular that, yeah, prices are gonna remain high. In a statement, a spokeswoman for Mr. Adams attributed the rise in hotel rates to the increase in tourism. About 62.2 million people visited the city last year, just below the record of 66.6 million in 2019. The return of tourists to New York City is reflected at hotels as well, where demand is up. New York City is safer, cleaner, and as the numbers show, continues to be one of the most popular destinations in the United States. There's another factor at play that really wasn't touched upon in the article, and that's inflation, which is affecting the entire United States and heck, the entire world. There was 2 articles written recently about Disney. Families are going into debt for Disney vacations. Is a Disney theme park vacation still worth the price? I wanted to see just how bad it was in Times Square to book a room for next month. I went into booking.com and I put a week in late September, the 22nd to 29th, and the cheapest room I found was $383 a night at the Pod Times Square. Now granted, it is a busy time of year to visit, but it's not a peak period. And honestly, I'm not such a fan of booking a hotel stay there, especially if you have a family, because later on in the video, we'll discuss some unsavory quality of life issues that are going on in that area. Now, the guide in me has a few suggestions, one of which is to book as far in advance as possible. Also, play with the dates. Look, we have 3 area airports here. I think it's just as important, if not more important, to get your hotel booked first rather than the flight, because getting a good hotel deal in New York can be pretty tricky. Now, for example, I put 1 week later and I put the hotel in downtown Brooklyn, which is about 30 minutes from Midtown, and I saw a deal for $247 a night. Not super cheap, but cheaper. Of course, the further away from Midtown you go, the cheaper it will get. You can look at Long Island City, Queens, you can look at Flushing, Queens. A lot of other areas of the city will save you money. But it's those hotels in Midtown which just drive up the costs and why it makes New York look just so unaffordable.
There's been a lot of negative media coverage about a famous attraction in the city, and that's Central Park and robberies. Let's read this headline. 3 teens in custody, 1 sought in Central Park mugging as robberies up 200%. A group of teens are in police custody after allegedly mugging 3 people in Central Park. It happened around 1 a.m. Tuesday at Grand Army Plaza at 59th and 5th. The suspects approached the victims with one apparently motioning, simulating they had a gun. They're accused of mugging 3 victims, ages 35, 21, and 15, of their AirPods and a chain. Now, arrests were made in this case. 2 of the 3 young suspects arrested in a robbery in Grand Army Plaza in Central Park early Tuesday are residing in city-run migrant shelters, one of them at the Row Hotel. Now, being such an iconic location, you know that the city is going to step up patrols, and the NYPD has a lot of surveillance going on in this area, particularly now between 7 to 11 p.m. Outside of the extra police presence, Mayor Adams said they might even implement drones to increase patrols. Mayor Adams on Tuesday acknowledged the troubling numbers and said they're looking at new technology like drones, and they will roll it out when the time is right. When something happens in Central Park, it becomes a huge international story. We are on top of it, and the commissioner is responding accordingly, Adams said. All right, let's take a big step back. Don't go canceling your Central Park plans just yet. Robberies are up 200% in Central Park this year, with 30 reported versus 10 at this point last year. While robberies are up 200%, that's 30 total robberies versus 10 last year, 20 extra. This park gets 42 million visitors a year, so do some math on that. What I would encourage you to do is not come here after dark, especially if you're a tourist,
be aware of your surroundings and, don't get lulled into a false sense of security just because this park is so beautiful. There's a specific avenue in Midtown right now that is getting all sorts of negative tension due to some quality of life issues, and that's 8th Ave, just a few minutes from Times Square. Let's start with this New York Post article. Midtown Manhattan's 8th Ave corridor plagued by junkies lying at tourists' feet, fighting in the streets. A stretch of Midtown Manhattan has become a strip of despair where smacked out addicts shoot up, light up, and conk out at the feet of commuters and tourists. I see a lot of things around here, one shop owner told the Post, of the so-called 8th Avenue corridor near Penn Station, where there's a cluster of addiction clinics and homeless shelters. Fights, drugs, oh my God, bad things. The latest stats from the NYPD show the Midtown South Precinct, which stretches from 9th Ave to Lexington, has some of the highest drug arrest numbers in the city, rivaling Harlem and the South Bronx. There have been at least 423 drug-related arrests in the 2 square miles of the Midtown South Precinct so far this year, an increase of roughly 100 busts over the same period last year. Thank you to the NYC Walking Show for letting me use clips from his recent video to illustrate what's going on. And I think that comes as no shock to people that have lived in New York for a long time, or even many tourists who walk the stretch between Port Authority to Penn Station. Look, it's always been grimy there. It's getting worse. I think that the whole country, big cities in the US in general, are having major issues with homelessness right now and mental health. Being prepared for that when you walk that strip is the best thing that I can say. If you see some unsavory behavior going on, don't be afraid to turn around or cross the street.
You know how we've talked about rip-off pedicab drivers on the channel? Well, it's far worse than I originally thought. This is from the New York Post. Out-of-control NYC pedicab drivers terrorize tourists, locals, and even sexually assault their own customers. They're like piranhas. Over the past few years, the driver's behavior has grown increasingly lawless, from blasting loud music and charging outrageous prices to brawling with customers and launching cartel-like attacks on competitors. The outlaw antics are reflected in a surge in pedicab-related criminal summonses, with cops issuing 1,493 violations through June 30th, a 51% spike from the 985 written during the same period in 2023. I'm not gonna bore you with the details here. Apparently, there was at least one sexual assault. There was also reports of them fighting some customers who didn't want to pay the exorbitant prices, and even fighting some carriage drivers. I am not trying to make a blanket statement that all pedicab drivers are bad, because they are definitely not. There are some great tour guides who have pedicabs. What I'm always encouraging you to do is not to hop blindly into one that is blasting techno music to try to get that tourist experience, because if you want to act like a tourist, they're going to charge you like a tourist. According to this article, up to $25 a minute. So always negotiate a price first if you want to do a tour with them. Remember that. So I actually polled you guys, the audience, and asked, has the negative publicity surrounding New York right now affected your decision to take a trip here? Or if you took a trip here recently, was there anything odd that you saw that you maybe wouldn't come back? Now, the vast majority of you said you would return. Cost is my only prohibitor. I felt 100% safe as a single traveling female with another single female, with my 12-year-old daughter, with my daughter, and another female. I was just in NYC for the weekend, stayed near Penn Station, walked everywhere, took LIRR out to the Mets game at late night pizza, never once felt unsafe. I've been to NYC many times over the years, including this year. I've walked the streets at all hours of the day and night and never felt unsafe. I am sick to death of a social media and right-wing media fear-mongering based on political agenda. And then this comment touched on something I didn't even think of. The one negative that was unexpected and something I did not experience on my previous 2 trips to NYC is the sheer number of tourists that are seemingly everywhere in New York. For example, we gave up on trying to get the Staten Island ferry because it was so overcrowded. On my last visit, the ferry was only half full. When I took it, it was impossible to move around Times Square. Roosevelt Island tramcar was also swarming with tourists, and those stuck in the middle pretty much saw nothing. I know there's over-tourism in many places in Europe. I believe there's also over-tourism in NYC. I actually want to touch on that. When you visit New York during a peak period, like the summer, that could happen. Partially due to people like me. Also, there's hundreds of short-form influencers on TikTok and Instagram. So basically any free site or cheap site in Manhattan is probably going to be very crowded, so expect that. Then we got some responses, as I expected, about the costs. I just went to NYC end of last month. My main concern, of course, was cost of a trip. I had originally planned a big group trip so we could all split the cost of a hotel room, but only 2 of us ended up going. Even though we stayed in Jersey City, The cost ended up being $900 a person, and that was just for the hotel. For context, I spent a week in Texas doing all of the major cities and spent $900 on all combined hotel rooms. Just booked my 11th trip to NYC. The only thing that's getting worse is costs, but that's everywhere in the world the same. That's the truth. Know coming in that this city is very expensive and start saving as early as possible. No matter what the media says, New York is still extremely popular, and there are droves and droves of tourists coming in and a limited amount of hotel rooms. This was a really good comment. Hi John, I just visited New York City at the end of July and wanted to add my 2 cents. I grew up in Ukraine and I'm currently living in the Middle East. I was visiting New York alone for 4 days until my husband arrived. I was really surprised by the number of homeless people and those with erratic behavior on the streets. I didn't walk alone after 8 p.m., but it was unpleasant to see this. I saw a lady being harassed in the subway by some weird dude once. Nothing happened to me, and thanks to your videos, I stayed out of trouble. All right, I think this is probably one of the biggest shocks of visiting the United States and big cities, the amount of homelessness and issues with mental health that you are likely to see during your trip. If you know this coming in and you expect to see it, I think it's gonna be a lot easier to digest. I don't have the answers to what the city could do to make this better. I wish I did. I think there's a lot of people who are still trying to figure that out and what they can do. The biggest complaint I actually got from recent tourists was the marijuana smell. Relatively local, right over the bridge in Jersey, but I don't like taking my kids into Manhattan anymore because of the constant weed smell in the air. The weed smoke drives me crazy. I've got no problem if people want to use marijuana, but the way that it can be so inconsiderately used in public is a negative for me in NYC. Just spent 6 days in New York, used the subway every day with my family. Occasional crazy, but that's everywhere. Felt safe everywhere. Only thing really stood out was a smell of marijuana everywhere. You gotta be prepared for that. If you're walking through Midtown Manhattan, if you're walking through Washington Square Park, odds are high you're gonna smell marijuana at least once, probably more. Not everyone who watches my channel does want to come to New York right now. Planning a retirement trip to Tokyo and Japan instead of New York. I got bad feedback from a couple of friends who said New York was dirty, overpriced, and felt dangerous. Would still like to visit New York in the future, but not in the next few years. Was booked to visit next February from the UK, have canceled and booked a week in Orlando instead due to the increased crime issues. Felt safe visiting back in 2017 and 2018, but not anymore. It's just too expensive. We visited New York twice last year before Airbnb was outlawed. Now $2,000 will only get you flight tickets, 2 nights at a hotel, and airport transfer. It's just ridiculous. This year we drive to the mountains or to the ocean. One weekend is around $500 or less. I think some of the results are skewed in my comments because as a channel that's generally positive about New York, people that want to visit here are going to watch and they're going to be the ones leaving comments. To circle back to the intro, is New York still worth it to visit even with all of these issues? I think if you do your homework, if you come in with your eyes wide open and you know what to expect, then I think you could have a great trip. But if you last visited here before the pandemic, you come back to the city, some things are definitely going to be different. If you use street smarts, common sense, you should have a fine time. But I'll repeat it, New York is not for everybody. But if you love big cities and all that come with it, at least as far as the United States is concerned, New York is impossible to top. Traveling to New York can be a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but visiting here comes with its own unique challenges, which is why I'll be sharing 50 must-know New York travel hacks. These will save you time, money, and headaches. Trust me, here we go. Take the NY ferries. Now, the Staten Island ferry is well known for its free Statue of Liberty views, but the $4 NY ferries are even better in my opinion. There's so many cool routes to take. Anything that runs along the East River is incredible. You'll pass some of the city's top bridges, like the Brooklyn, and you can even sit up top and get some of the same views that much more expensive tour boats have. Of all the things in this video, this might be my favorite NYC travel hack. I just try to avoid peak commuting times when New Yorkers are going to and from work, as that's its primary purpose. Take a free walking tour with a Big Apple greeter. You've heard of free walking tours where you tip at the end. Those are great, but there's a program called the Big Apple Greeters where local volunteers take you around the city showing you their favorite areas. You just fill out a form and they see if they can find someone to place you with as long as it's 1 month's notice. We're talking hidden gems. It's like seeing New York with a long-lost friend, and they won't even accept money if you try, but maybe a small gift from your home city or country would be nice. Visit bigapplegreeter.org for more info to sign up. Give this plenty of notice if you can. One of my favorite ways to impress friends or family visiting is to take them to any of the hidden streets of New York. Here are some of my favorites. Washington Mews, which is steps from Washington Square Park. It feels like you stepped into Europe. Sylvan Terrace uptown is absolutely gorgeous and full of history. Freeman Alley is like walking through a movie set, and we've got Stone Street, which basically feels like Harry Potter world. I'll throw in 6.5 Avenue, which I can't even believe exists and runs directly between two different avenues. There's even more of these, but I'll let you try to find out where they are. This is an amazing idea that I'd save to impress someone special. People ask me sometimes, what would be the one place to go celebrate something huge? And I tell them Saga in Lower Manhattan. It's gotten 2 Michelin stars, and we filmed at Overstory, which is the cocktail bar 1 floor above it, so I've seen it. You're eating a world-class meal, and then you get free access to the outdoor rooftop, which has some of the best views of the city I've ever seen. It's like going to One World Observatory, but being outside of it. So that's a 2-for-1 trick during warmer months I'd recommend that may leave you speechless. This is the best JFK Airport arrival hack I have. If you want to take public transit into the city, go take the Long Island Railroad, also known as the LIRR, from Jamaica Station, which is connected to the air train. You can head to either Grand Central or Penn Station for the princely sum of $5 with a city ticket. The seats are more comfortable, there's luggage racks, and it's direct in only 20 minutes. I've never taught anyone this tip who wasn't shocked how simple it was. Of course, this works best if you don't have a ton of luggage and are staying in Midtown. If you need more details, see my video on JFK Airport tips, which we shot earlier this year. This one is simple, but Tap to Pay now works on any device that has a chip. So if you have a card saved, or you can even tap your credit card, and you don't need a Metro card. In fact, they're gonna get phased out eventually. Even at the air train at JFK, they now have readers installed. So before you get to New York, make sure that Tap to Pay is enabled on your phone. It seems like most countries are way ahead of the US on this anyway, but we finally have it on our subways, which just makes life easier. No more having to worry about refilling your Metro card. And if you were thinking of buying a 7-day unlimited, you'll automatically ride free after your 12th paid trip as long as you use the same device. So this is just such a game changer in taking the subways and buses in New York. And if you insist on buying a Metro card, save it as a souvenir. BYOB or bring your own bottle restaurants are like unicorns in New York because they're so tough to find these days. Locals like to guard them tightly, but if you enjoy drinking while you have dinner, you can save a fortune finding them. Peking Duck House in Chinatown is probably the most famous one, but there's plenty of others out there. Now, some charge a corkage fee, some don't. Some places even let you bring your own beer or liquor. This may be a topic I will dive into at some point in the channel, because if you order enough $18 cocktails when you go out, your bill will get pricey in a hurry. Some underrated photo spots of New York. You know, some of the best photo opportunities of the city aren't even in the state of New York. Just crossing the Hudson to go to Hoboken provides you bird's eye views of the Manhattan skyline. From the east side, I love the views at Gantry State Plaza in Long Island City, and Roosevelt Island also provides some unique perspectives as well. More about Roosevelt Island later on in this video. Let's talk about New York's community gardens and hidden parks. There's some treasures hidden in plain sight in the Big Apple, and most neighborhoods have them. They're called community gardens. Many date back to the days when the city was really struggling and are still an oasis among the concrete jungle. There's also some great hidden parks in Midtown I want to highlight, such as Paley Park and Green Acre Park. These two are a great place to take a break during a busy day of sightseeing. Don't pass them up if you have the chance. Explore lesser-known museums. I realize that if time is tight, you may not have the ability to hit these spots, but if you're a fan of the iconic New York subway, then the Transit Museum is a cheap way to step back in time. Head right for the basement and check out subway cars from the last 100 years and see the evolution of transportation as you take some amazing photos. Another museum I think needs more love is at Francis Tavern. Go here to explore the city's Revolutionary War roots. And both are inexpensive at just $10 for admission and way less crowded than the bigger spots that most go to. Free museum days. I'm gonna link to this updated Time Out New York article in the description, but there are many museums that have free days or pay what you wish hours, which could save you a lot of money. The only caveat here is they usually get quite crowded during those periods, so keep that in mind. Some of the more popular ones are the Morgan Fridays 5 to 7 p.m., which requires reservations a week in advance, as well as the Whitney every Friday from 5 to 10. The New York Historical Society is Pay What You Wish on Fridays from 6 to 8. The New Museum of Contemporary Art is Pay What You Wish on Thursday, 7 to 9 p.m. For the rest of the list, see the link down below. Explore Central Park's lesser-known areas. Everybody knows that Central Park is a must-visit. Now you can just scratch the surface, you can find the really cool parts away from the crowds at the bottom. If you have the time, my top pick is the Conservatory Garden with an entrance near 105th and 5th Ave. It's absolutely one of the top free things you can do in New York. And if you want even more ideas for Central Park, check out the entire guide we shot to it. We cover the park from top to bottom. Speakeasy bars. Now, if you're over 21 and looking for some distinctly New York adventures, I don't think any other city on the planet has as many hidden speakeasy bars as the Big Apple. These take you back to the days of Prohibition, and there's usually some kind of hidden entrance situation. But if you're a fan of cocktails, I've seen that most of them actually pay really close attention to the quality of their drinks. We visited one recently called Little Shop, which was hidden in the back of a bodega, and that may have been the most clever one I've seen yet. Their drinks rocked. It's a really great date idea as well. What about Broadway tickets for cheap? You've probably heard of the TKTS booth, but did you know about lotteries and SRO, also known as standing room only tickets? Check any show that you're interested in seeing. Go on their website, especially if it's red hot or sold out, and they almost all have some kind of lottery system or standing room only deals day of the show. Some of these are digital lotteries, other times you actually have to go line up, and I've met people who would spend one morning trying to get rush tickets to a few shows, and they'd come up with some crazy steals. You could also try with the Today Tix app. In fact, I recommend you download it right now. They also offer some really nice discounts. Even though we've mentioned this a lot on the channel, taking the tramway to Roosevelt Island from Midtown is still not known to the majority of tourists to New York. Seriously, for the cost of a subway tap, $2.90, you get to soar above the city and then land on Roosevelt Island. We did an entire video dedicated on what to do there with a lifelong resident, but there's some hidden treasures on that place. Most notably, all the viewpoints of Manhattan and the peace and quiet it offers so close to the hustle and bustle. I don't even visit there enough, which is sad, but riding a city bike around that place is pretty tough to beat for a nice morning or leisurely afternoon activity. Could this be New York's most underrated attraction? It's amazing how many world cities have a famous cemetery that has a storied history, that has many celebrities resting there, and it's a can't-miss destination. Well, Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn was one of New York's most popular attractions and has generally fallen out of view even by locals. The views of the skyline are fantastic and the architecture is absolutely stunning. If this were in Manhattan, I'm convinced it would be way more popular. Take a tour or check out all the programming that goes on there year-round, such as movies and even concerts. A little observation deck hack for you. If you hate touristy observation decks, I get it. Some rooftop bars do offer amazing views and you just have to buy a drink. Now, we did mention Overstory before if you want that classy date experience, but the one that I actually get the most DMs about from happy viewers is at Beast and Butterflies in Times Square. That's a unique view that even Top of the Rock couldn't give you because you stare right at the bright lights. Go at night for maximum effect, and this one is great because children are allowed up there as well. Free kayaking. This is amazingly popular with locals and not as well known by tourists, but New York has some great free kayaking programs. The most famous one is at Pier 26 on the Hudson River. My personal pick, though, is the one at Brooklyn Bridge Park, as the views are unreal. It's offered on Wednesday and Thursday evenings and Saturday and Sunday afternoons during the season. Both do recommend reservations, although you could get lucky if you just show up. This is something a whole family could even do together and is way different than a typical New York afternoon activity. You get about 15 or 20 minutes. You want to save some money on New York hotels and don't stay in Midtown Manhattan. The best deals are in the outer boroughs, which in this case we're referring to Brooklyn and Queens. The one area I've actually had a bunch of friends who are visiting the city quite impressed with the quality, price, and location was downtown Brooklyn, because you're only a few stops away from Manhattan, and for whatever reason, the prices are really fair. Long Island City, Queens is another spot that I've had friends stay at who are happy with, and if we're talking time of year, usually right after New Year's, the second week or so of January is actually the cheapest time of year to come here for hotel prices, although be prepared for some cold. For the least crowds at observation decks, be the first one for admission. You can pre-book tickets for all of the observation decks, pick the earliest slot possible, and this is actually quite easy to do. Ditto for the Statue of Liberty. I've heard the lines lately are super long, so going early and knocking it out will ensure the boat isn't full as well. And as I always say, visiting the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island can easily eat up half a day, so going early on is never a bad idea. And make sure to buy your tickets in advance, not with any random resellers outside. Here's how you save money on sporting event tickets. Now, New York has had some really good teams lately. The Rangers, the Knicks, the Yankees are playing well. Tickets to some regular season games can be pricey, and while it's easiest to save money on baseball tickets because they have the longest season, my top advice to save money on a hot ticket is wait till the day of the game. And if you're feeling patient enough, go to the stadium or arena, then right before the game starts, check the StubHub app. People will be way more desperate to dump their tickets, and you can get some really great deals this way. Sometimes you don't even need to do this. Just check a few days before, and you may even get a better price than at the box office. Again, this works best for baseball. Sadly, finding a bathroom when you need it in New York is like trying to find Waldo in a black and white photo. Impossibly tricky. I always advise using the facilities before you leave your hotel, at any attraction, or after a meal, but sometimes nature calls at the worst moments. I get it. So these are the spots I would look for a public bathroom. Any hotel lobby is by far the easiest. Bryant Park has the cleanest public bathroom in the city. The M&M store is one that most people don't realize on the top floor has some nice bathrooms. And lastly, I would say any bar or some restaurants would work as well. Are you planning on coming to New York last minute and want to save some money? Well, the app Hotel Tonight is a very good one for those last minute travelers. I've seen this generally work best if you're only staying for one night and you just scroll the app, you see all the hotels with major price cuts because the rooms probably aren't going to be used. I actually did use this once when our flight got canceled in Rome, but if you live within a couple of hours or in the tri-state area and are just thinking of a last minute trip into New York, this is a handy application to definitely save you some money, so put it on your phone. All right, you need to try the most famous street food in New York, and that is halal, which is typically lamb, chicken, or beef over rice with some kind of white sauce or any sauce. I've heard too many horror stories of my viewers just randomly trying a hot dog and not having a very tasty experience. You are far better off randomly buying halal from a vendor than a hot dog. Although if you want my all-time favorite, favorites in Manhattan, that'll be Adele's, but their lines are super long. But I also recommend Royal Halal, which is a few blocks away and almost never has much of a line. Their chicken tikka plate is my favorite, but either way, don't leave New York unless you've tried at least one halal cart. If you don't have the time to hit the outlets in New York State, Century 21 in Lower Manhattan is an amazing option. Now, this was closed for 3 years after the pandemic, but it reopened in 2023. And across its 4 floors, you'll find everything from men's clothing, women's clothing, children's apparel, footwear, handbags, housewares, and some authenticated vintage items. And they even made it over a little bit. They have a self-checkout now. They have New York City-focused gifts. This is an alternative if you don't want to go to any of the outlets like Jersey Gardens or Woodbury Commons. Those will provide ultimately the best deals, but they're also going to eat up half of your day, so really factor in how important that big shopping trip is for you. If you want to get cash back at tons of NYC restaurants, this is an app I even use myself. It's called Seated. It's really simple. You just pick a participating restaurant on the list, and there's tons of them in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, and whatever the percentage is, you get that back on your bill. I've seen it as high as 21% before, and you get the money instantly. The coolest part is you can buy gift cards with it, like Airbnb, Uber, there's a lot of others. And if you want a $10 bonus added to your first meal, use my code JOHN28. New York has so much public art where you don't even have to pay for a museum. And I'm not talking about street art, which is its own thing. You can find all of it, including temporary and permanent exhibitions on this site, which breaks them down by type. So if you're a Civil War fan and want to see all 31 monuments, just click there and you'll find out about Abraham Lincoln's at Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn, or the 11 Latino monuments. Have some fun with it. See if you can add any of these to routes you're going to be taking around the city anyway. Sitting in the conductor's car on the subway. I love bringing this one up for safety purposes because I even use this myself. If you want to sit in the same subway car where the conductor's going to be, all you have to do is look for the black and white zebra board, or as it's called, the indication board, usually against a wall near the center of the platform or hanging down. And that's where the conductor's car will stop and he'll point outside. You can also ask him a question if you're lost, so it really serves a dual purpose. All right, here's how you save money at a deli. If you go to any of the famous Jewish delis like Katz's, Sarge's, which is my pick, Second Ave Deli, the pastrami sandwiches are well over $20 each. But they're huge and an easy share for 2 people unless you're absolutely starving. I hear too many of my viewers get shocked about how big they are and realize they probably should have shared one and they don't want to lug it around all day to take back to their hotel. I could personally handle one myself, but it also means I might not be eating anything for the rest of the day. So factor that in if you're going to one of these legendary spots, and don't be afraid to share the sandwiches. All right, here's a must visit, the New York Public Library and the Polanski exhibition. And while I think visiting the library is pretty common knowledge among many tourists, not all realize that the Polanski exhibition is now permanent, and this is one of the best exhibits in the entire city, absolutely for free. They have the original Winnie the Pooh bear in there and a lot of other famous artifacts, like a signed copy of the Declaration of Independence. You could easily spend a half hour inside. This may be the best free rooftop view in New York, and yeah, we really harp on rooftops on this channel because there's no better way to get a feel for just how big New York is. And going right across the street from the public library to the Stavros Niarchos Library and visiting their rooftop is a requirement. It is such a hidden gem and was actually my favorite item on my 50 best free things to do in New York video. So if you need more ideas of free things to do, go watch that as well. What's the best way to get data on your phone in New York? Well, if you're visiting the city from overseas, I recommend getting an eSIM. These are amazing because you can download them in advance with a QR code and have them ready to go before you even touch down at the airport. You can also use WhatsApp with them. They're a great alternative to having to go to a local carrier and getting a SIM card or paying a lot in roaming charges. My personal pick is Olafly. See my link in the description if you want to get 5% off yours. Here's a great cheap breakfast hack. If you go to just about any deli or bodega as they're known locally, you're almost guaranteed to find a cheap breakfast. A bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich on a roll is the iconic breakfast sandwich of New York and definitely won't break the bank. They're usually $3, $4, $5. If you want to eat more and have a sit-down meal, a lot of the classic diners still offer really good deals. My two favorites are Pearl Diner in Lower Manhattan and the TikTok Diner in Midtown. I know some tourists, when they go somewhere, just want to hit the main attractions, and there's others who want to live like locals, and the local New Yorkers need to get out of their small apartments to go to events and activities. The Skint is my favorite site. They have a great email newsletter as well. For anyone who's just moved here, they don't miss anything. All the festivals and street fairs and openings you can handle. Like, I saw the only Greek-Jewish festival in the world that happened on May 18th. Time Out New York is a bit more limited, but their website does highlight some cool events and shows as well. I would look at both of those during your trip if you want some local activities. Cash is king. Now, this isn't as true as it was before COVID, but I still run into plenty of eateries that are cash only. A lot of the hole-in-the-wall spots, in fact, some of the best ones in Chinatown, are cash only. It's not that big of a deal to find ATMs, but I always recommend you have at least 40 or 50 bucks in your wallet, just in case you stumble onto something really cool and want to pay for it right away. New York is a walking city. Do not bring new shoes here. Break them in before your trip. If you're not used to walking a lot, pace yourself. Practice before you come here. Last thing you want is heel or ankle pain after 3 or 4 days of walking 5 to 7 miles. Remember, the city is best seen on foot. If you're coming from somewhere where you drive everywhere, prepare yourself. And speaking of walking, depending on what country you're from, this may surprise you or maybe not, but every New Yorker will cross the street without a walk signal if there's no incoming traffic. Or sometimes I even see them jogging to avoid said oncoming traffic. Jaywalking tickets are almost unheard of here, although don't blame me if you're the 1 in a million that actually gets one. But when you get to Midtown, you'll see people are not waiting to cross if they get the opportunity, and you can feel free to join them. This may be a hack to save you some time sifting through my channel, because as far as food is concerned, my viewers' all-time favorites I keep hearing about are 2 places: Bleecker Street Pizza and the Nonna Maria Slice, and a hot dog from Billy's. I'm really not surprised by either, since a Nonna Maria is the perfect hybrid slice between a Neapolitan and a New York one, with fresh ingredients and that Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. And then finding a hot dog vendor who is actually gonna have a nice chat with you, ask where you're from, and provide a quality product isn't so easy these days, and that's where Billy, right next to Central Park, comes along and charms all those who stop by. Bring your own bag. Plastic bag bans are a big deal here, so you'll have to keep paying at supermarkets for their bags. I'd personally make a point to buy a really cool tote bag while you're here, or bring one from home if you're gonna do any kind of grocery shopping. Otherwise, you're gonna have to keep paying for new ones. I just want to remind everyone that it's okay to be a tourist. This isn't a travel hack per se, but a mindset thing. I know everyone wants to be a local when you visit New York, but if there's an attraction or 2 or 3 you really want to do, go do them. I've visited almost every attraction in the city, and some of them are one of a kind. Attraction passes are useful if that's your top priority. Don't let anyone tell you to skip the touristy stuff and only live like the locals, even me. There's a reason New York is one of the most visited cities in the world. There's enough to keep you busy here for days if you just want to see the attractions as a tourist. I've actually gotten this tip from a few of my viewers. After COVID, many iconic and popular restaurants allow you to do to-go orders. Katz's Deli is the one I keep hearing about, but there's many others. So even if the spot isn't famous and you're in a rush, place a pickup order on the way back to your hotel. You can do this with DoorDash, Uber Eats. Because remember, if you place an order for delivery, expect at least a 30 to 45-minute wait for most restaurants. So if you do a pickup order, you're gonna save yourself time, and you may save a really long line if it's a spot that's very famous. Here's a great way to save money on takeaway. It's called Too Good To Go. It's super popular with locals, but many tourists have not heard about this app, and how it works is you check it for restaurants or eateries nearby who have extra food, and the app is all about saving food waste, so it can be for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and they give you what's called a surprise bag. It costs like $4, $5, and you pick it up at the restaurant. You don't know what's in there, but I've heard stories of full meals. Sometimes it's a sandwich, a lot of pizza spots will do it, and you're saving yourself easily $10 or $15. Do this for a few people. If you are on a shoestring budget, this could be a very cheap way to eat in the city. Do not sleep on Washington Square Park. I used to live right by there. If you need to kill an hour just to relax, the spot is perfect. And they always have live music going on somewhere, and even if they don't, it's the heart of the village, and people watching will be tremendous. You will definitely be entertained, that I can promise you, but I will warn you about the constant smell of marijuana there. City Mapper, another game-changing app. Definitely download it before you come to New York. I prefer it to Google Maps because it just feels a bit more intuitive to me. My favorite feature is that you can even see which subway car to take, so you're closest to the exact exit that will put you on the street that you need. Perfect for my fellow Type A personalities watching. I know that's many of you, so give it a look. New York has so many different types of pizzas. I want to make sure you try something old school, like a plain slice at Luigi's in Park Slope, or even a Joe's worst case in the Village. Then try something new school, like Linda Street in Williamsburg, I don't know, the burrata slice, or Almano's on Canal Street in Manhattan, or my boy Dave's Slices at Philomena's in Queens, where they ferment the dough for a couple of days. New York is having a moment right now with its pizza, so you can honestly find the best of all worlds right now. If you're a pizza fan, go wild exploring. All right, tips for traveling with small kids, which I don't touch on enough on this channel. If you're traveling with small children, not all subways are accessible. Not all of them have elevators, and even if they do, they won't always be functioning. So make sure you bring a super compact, foldable stroller, because you may need to take it down the stairs, and if you're by yourself, you may need to have your child either holding your hand or in your arms when you do so. Now here's a little bonus tip. The Met is actually free for children 12 and under if they can handle an art museum, and they have a new active play and a learning center called the 81st Street Studio, which is under the Met, completely free. There's also tons of playgrounds all over Manhattan and Brooklyn if they need a break, and I'm sure they will. Dress up for summer. If you're somebody that is sensitive to the cold, listen up, because we're not talking about winter. Even in the summer, it can be cold in New York because due to American culture, we have AC everywhere. Broadway theaters can be cold in the audience. Even the subway sometimes inside can get a little bit chilly. So if you're sensitive to air conditioning, bring something light to cover up, because even my mom complains about the air conditioning in restaurants every time she visits New York. Be prepared for this. This isn't so much a hack, but a friendly reminder that there's a lot of negative publicity about New York lately with crime, because it gets clicks. This is still one of the safest big cities in the US. The best advice I have for you is if you see someone looking like they're acting unstable, remove yourself from the situation. Cross the street. Move away on the subway. Switch subway cars at the next stop. Always pay attention to your surroundings. You'll have a great trip, but you have to keep your wits about you here. The biggest thing to look out for is somebody acting unstable, either due to drugs or mental illness, and removing yourself from those situations. I gotta give a big shout out to Atlas Obscura. I love, love, love this website. If you wanna know where I find a lot of the hidden gems for my videos, their site and book is where I turn to. So if you get bored with the ordinary, look at their page. They've only got 755 quirky things to do in New York that you really won't find in many guidebooks. Heck, use them in any city you visit to have a little more fun. I've heard countless stories of how this strategy has unearthed hidden treasures. But pick one morning or one afternoon and just explore a neighborhood. The great thing about New York is every neighborhood could be its own city. Too many people cram their itineraries and leave nothing to chance. Let the city inspire you a little bit. Just roam around the city staring at buildings or walk into a cafe or a random shop you've never heard of. Thank me later.
The first impression many tourists get of New York is right here at the airport, and unfortunately, it's not always a pleasant one. Today, I'll share how to avoid getting ripped off and scammed minutes after you arrive, and then the best and cheapest ways to get from JFK to Midtown Manhattan, and a few other common airport mistakes you want to avoid that'll have you feeling like a local. Here we go. We're gonna start with 2 potential scams that tourists need to be aware of the second they get out of arrivals, and one of these is so sneaky that even some of my more experienced travelers could fall for it. You've seen it in the movies, hailing a taxi from the airport and riding into the city in style, but that's where you have to be careful. Here's how it works. You'll walk out here and somebody will approach you offering you a taxi ride. They might say taxi or Midtown. And they may even tell you you'll get a better price than anywhere else, but never accept these rides. Or this could happen. This British couple was scammed $470. A man stood in the airport entrance, offered them a cab to their hotel, and Craig assumed it would go to the meter and cost 50 bucks. The pair later realized they should have been suspicious when he led them away to a private car park, away from the taxi rank and into a minibus driven by a second man. He asked them for the $20 for the parking fee, which they presumed would be taken off the bill, and told them they'd sort the fare when we get there. He started explaining to us that there were new toll fees for going between boroughs and over bridges. He then told me to take me to Manhattan. It was going to be $900. Now, I know what you're all thinking. If this happened to me, I would just get out of the car as soon as he told me that bad price. But keep this in mind, if your luggage is in the back, you're practically a hostage. This guy had an expensive engagement ring in his suitcase, and he really had no choice but to negotiate with the rogue driver. Now, if you do end up taking one of these unmarked taxis, best case scenario, you'll probably get a little bit ripped off. Worst case scenario, you'll pay a fortune or worse. And keep this in mind, even if you think you're getting a better deal, these cars are not insured. If anything goes wrong, you have nobody that you can complain to. Oh, welcome.
We're here for 5 days. I've watched everything.
We're actually making a video right now about arriving to the airport. If you don't mind, you feel free to be in the video.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Imagine that you arrive in New York and the first person you see is me. An even sneakier scam is somebody will be holding up an iPad or a sign that says Uber. Now, maybe you're coming from overseas and you think in the US that Ubers are just waiting for you without calling them. These are not Ubers. They're also unlicensed cars. It's the same situation. You're gonna be going into a livery cab. They're gonna charge you whatever they want, and you have no insurance, no way to fight anything. So also avoid those. I have seen those fake Ubers as recently as this year at LaGuardia. What are the legitimate ways to get a car into Manhattan? And the first and the most obvious is taking a yellow taxi. Now, if you're like my parents, you don't like messing with a smartphone, this is by far the easiest and simplest way to get into Midtown or anywhere else in New York. You just find the taxi sign right there. They will assign you a number and you just find the lane. There was like 10 people waiting. Actually, I don't think you would have waited very long at all for a taxi had you have taken this lane. The guy's really asking for a taxi right there. You see that? The guy behind me is literally trying to get people to not take the taxi line and just go. It still happens. As of late 2023, the flat fare is $70 or $75 if it's between 4 to 8 p.m. during weekdays and excluding holidays. Then we have tolls up to $6.94, a $2.50 congestion surcharge for trips that end in Manhattan south of 96th Street, which is likely where you'll be staying. So you're looking at about $95 to $100, including a $12 to $15 tip. This is not an inexpensive method to get into the city, but I do recommend it highly for groups or for people that are just not comfortable navigating public transit. By the way, if you have an issue with your driver, the good news is that you can contact something called 311. You can report unsafe driving or any other issue you run into. Just make sure you have your driver's name or identifying number from the taxi if you do run into any problems. And one more thing, all New York City taxis must have a working credit card reader. Ride shares. Now this is my personal preferred method. When I'm at JFK Airport, normally I'm traveling with my wife and my son. I don't want to deal with public transit. And why I love ride shares at this airport is you have 3 different options that you can shop with and see what the best deal is. Important note, any terminal at JFK or any area airport is gonna have signs for either rideshare pickup, Uber, Lyft pickup, whatever it may be. Just follow the signs outside. I'm gonna use all 3 rideshare apps and I'm gonna check which one has the best price, the Marriott Marquis in Midtown. JFK Terminal 4. All right, we're gonna start with Uber. We have got a price of $89.93, which a little bit more than a taxi would be, and you would wait 1 minute, so you wouldn't have to deal with a taxi line. Next up, Lyft. Price would be, cheapest would be $91.95, so $2 more. And my personal favorite is Revel, where you ride completely electric cars. Use this code for 40% off your first 2 rides. $88.47. Although I will admit Revel does have the longest wait of 17 minutes. That's the issue with Revels, is they do tend to take a little bit longer than a Lyft or an Uber. Something else to keep in mind about ride shares is you are expected to tip 15 to 20%, depending on the experience that you had. So factor that in. Those costs though do include tolls. In this scenario, at this time of day, I believe a taxi would have saved you maybe $2 or $3. So they were all almost the same. Now, when you call your ride share, you just have to cross the street, at least at Terminal 4, they're pretty similar, and find on your phone what letter and number corresponds to your driver. So if you got an Uber, it might say B1 or B2, and that's where your driver's gonna meet you. Just follow the signs. They make it really easy here. When you're arriving to New York City, make sure you have the exact address, east side or west side if you're in Manhattan. I'm gonna show you why. If you just put 109 42nd Street onto Uber, you would get the following choices. The first option is in Union City, New Jersey. So if you just tap that, you're heading to Jersey and you're probably spending $150. 109 East 42nd Street's by Bryant Park, and 109 West 42nd is a completely different address. So look very carefully at your address, and if it says New York, New York, that's Manhattan. If it says Brooklyn, New York, that is not Manhattan. Look how much that would cost you from here. $140. One other trick to keep in mind if you have some patience and the prices are surging on all of the apps, if you wait 10 or 15 minutes, it could change. Of course, in that case, you might just be better off waiting in the taxi line so you can see how long the taxi line is. If it's not long, a lot of times that is a better play. Before we get to the lower cost options to get to Manhattan, I want to throw one more out there that I think is just not worth it, and that is the shared shuttle service. It's about $50, and how it works is they pack as many passengers as possible into a van and they just drive you all over Manhattan, dropping people off. Now, depending how lucky you are, it might be the same speed as a taxi or an Uber. If you're unlucky, you might be sitting in gridlock traffic as the shuttle goes from hotel to hotel, and if your hotel's last, it could take you 2 hours with traffic to get there. So I think in this case, the middle ground is not worth it. I'd either go expensive or cheap. By the way, for those who haven't been here since 2020, the New York City Airporter bus no longer operates. It was $19 into the city, not a thing anymore. If you are on an absolute budget, I'm gonna show you how to get to Midtown Manhattan using public transit. Now, something to keep in mind about both of these options is it's extra work. If you're flying in overnight, if it's your first time in the city, if you have a big group, I recommend a taxi or a ride share. But if you really want to save money, these two options are interesting. So the first step is to find signs for the air train in any terminal. And something to keep in mind here is that for the air train, you pay at the end. You do not pay for your ticket before boarding. It's free to ride around the terminals. That's how people transfer. All right, so a lot of flights have just arrived. We're following the signs here. Transit to the city. It's going to arrive on both sides. We're going to Jamaica Station. Next one's in 5 minutes. Hear what she said? Let the other passengers off first before you get on. That's subway courtesy as well. Remember what I said, if you have an overnight flight, you just don't want to deal with stressful situations. This can be a little stressful. The first thing to keep in mind when you get off the air train is you cannot use contactless payment. You have to have a Metro card or a special AirTrain card, which you normally get from the machine the second you get out.
Because the fee has been waived.
So this is interesting. I've heard stories about this. They waived the AirTrain fee. It's free today. Maybe because there's too many people.
Please proceed down to level 1. You can walk.
Well, they must have known I was coming. What's this? Guys, I'm sorry. The air train just went from free to back to 8:25 5 minutes later. I have no idea why. I learn something new every day. You could just get lucky and not pay. Unless it's your lucky day, like it just was for us, and they suddenly waive air train fees, you need to go to one of the machines and pay $8.25 to purchase an AirTrain pass plus an extra $1 for the new card. Now I would just buy a Metro card with it, which would be $9.25. Then you have two choices, one of which is the cheaper one to take the New York City subway for $2.75. Now you could add $2.75 to your card there, pay $12 and be ready with one swipe, or watch my New York City subway survival guide video so you know how to use Omni contactless payment on your phone. I recommend that so much more than having to spend extra money to put more on the Metro card. Just tap and go for the subway. I'm gonna show you how to take the subway and why I honestly don't like it very much. Let's go. All right, so we are following the crowd, following signs for the subway. We're looking for the E-train. So while you are getting the best price, you are also walking a lot more. Now, because the AirTrain fee was waived, this would be the only option to buy a Metro card. And look at this line here. So hopefully you have contactless payment enabled on your phone. You can skip this line. All right, let's find the E-train heading for Manhattan. I'm gonna recommend if you take the subway, go as far down as you can away from the crowds. You'll get a better chance at a seat. The only advantage I see to the E-train is if your hotel is located close to one of the stops, it actually could be kind of useful. But if you're staying anywhere in Midtown, I just don't think this is the best option. Let me show you what to do when the train comes. It takes about 50 minutes to get to Midtown. As I said, go towards the end and you'll probably get a seat if you're fast. Instead of taking the subway, I prefer taking the Long Island Railroad, also known as the LIRR. So either if the AirTrain happens to be free, you leave, or you pay $8.25 plus the extra $1, $9.25 to exit off the machine. Now you can either buy a Long Island Railroad ticket from another machine, just a little bit down the corridor, or my pick, go to the MTA Train Time app, and you would select Jamaica as the origin, and then either Grand Central or Penn Station as the destination. And there's one right now, there's one in 8 minutes. These are running constantly to 34th Street Penn Station. And you could buy a city ticket off peak for $5. That's it, $5 is what you would have to spend. So that's $2.25 more to get to Manhattan in double the speed and to be in more comfort, as I'm about to show you. If your train is between 6 and 8 in the morning on the LIRR heading to Manhattan, or 4 to 8 p.m. on the way back to JFK, you can buy what's called a peak city ticket, which is only $2 more at $7. So again, the total cost would be $14.25 in most situations to get to 34th Street, Penn Station, or 42nd Street, Grand Central. You've got two choices. We're doing a video about how to get from the airport to the city.
Okay, so you're going to go under all other tickets, city tickets, off peak, and you're going to make it a pen.
Want to go? $5. Thank you. So the trick is, if you want to get, thank you for helping us, if you want to get a city ticket, you have to go all other tickets to get the discounted price. Friendly staff here too. Got on our phone that it's track 2, easy to find. No escalator, unfortunately. That kind of sucks. If you have a ton of luggage, I don't recommend the subway or the LIRR. If you have a reasonable amount of luggage, LIRR is fine. But you may find yourself taking some steps like this. And if you're unsure, you just look up. It says Penn Station, 3 minutes. It is so clear. I'm telling you, for $2.25, you're getting like $10 of a better experience. Very important, before boarding, make sure to activate your ticket, okay? I have to show you all a common mistake I see with the LIRR. I've had viewers, I believe, they get on this and they just go right to the ends. And look, this barely could even fit my small suitcase. In order to find the biggest luggage rack, you have to go to the middle areas of the train. This would fit a suitcase, I think almost double this size. Also, for that extra $2.25, look how much more space you get here. Oh, just cleaner, nicer. And this goes directly to Penn Station. Now you're still gonna have to walk or possibly take another subway depending where your destination is in the city, so factor that in. A topic that I have been asked so many times that I've never actually addressed in a video is about SIM cards when you arrive to New York. Now you do have the option to buy it at JFK, but I'm gonna tell you why I don't recommend that. Now in the past, they did have SIM card machines. There's one here at Terminal 4, but it's not even operating. So your only option is to go to a kiosk, and I checked myself. I was just curious, what's the cheapest 7-day pass you have?
The cheapest is $45. You get 4 GB internet, unlimited phone, unlimited.
Okay, thank you. The cheapest 7-day SIM card was $45, which I think is too expensive. So your best bet is, one, check with your local carrier to see if they offer some kind of an international package. That might just be the easiest for you. You don't have to deal with SIM cards, going to a store. The other would be going on Amazon or any other retailer online before you leave. You can order US SIM cards in advance off of Amazon. And if you can't do any of those, I recommend going to the T-Mobile store, which is right across the street from Macy's by Herald Square in Midtown Manhattan. $15 to $30 is the range that I've been told. Do some research on that, but I definitely don't recommend buying it right away at JFK Airport because they do have pretty good Wi-Fi available. In fact, let me check if it works for me. Free JFK Wi-Fi, free unlimited Wi-Fi. You are now online. The free Wi-Fi, it's working. So if you're concerned about calling an Uber, I think you should be able to get service across this. Should we check? Let's check. If you do call an Uber and you're using the JFK Wi-Fi, I tested it. I lost it like right across the street. So I think you could hang out by the terminal and you could probably see your car more or less when it's about to pull up and then go. I think you could survive just on the terminal Wi-Fi. These smart carts are $6 to rent and you purchase them inside. Now, sometimes if you get lucky, somebody might just leave one out here and you might be able to use it for free. Not guaranteed to happen, so if you have a lot of luggage, this can actually be quite useful. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to Union City, New Jersey. New York City, a name that instantly brings many images to mind, many of them not so positive. There are so many myths floating out there about the Big Apple, and today I'm gonna be debunking the most common ones. New Yorkers are rude. I think New Yorkers get a bad rap for lots of reasons, and being mean or being rude is near the top of the list. I just want to say, as far as hospitality is concerned, especially at restaurants, I find we have some of the best waiters, many of them making it a profession. And say what you want about tipping, but for customer service, I think New York is tough to beat at sit-down restaurants. Now, the people are a different story because they have that gruff exterior on the outside, especially in Manhattan, where everybody always seems like they're in a rush because, well, they are in a rush. And I didn't come up with this quote, but I agree with it. New Yorkers are kind, but not nice. Meaning they won't be fake nice with you, but they'll be real. And if you're in trouble, you'll be surprised how quickly New Yorkers will come to your aid. Just don't waste their time or expect a lot of small talk. One little quirk is if you're lost and a New Yorker overhears where you're going, they may shout out which way to go as they keep rushing on by. That literally happened to me a week ago when we were filming in the West Village and I couldn't find this little side street. Some girl walked by and said, 1 block that way. She just kept on hurrying along. Very New York moment. Now, you've probably heard the term before, dirty water dog, but what that actually means is the water in the vat has been seasoned with spices, giving it that darkish appearance. I will be the first one to jump up and exclaim that it is safe to eat street food in New York. I have had more of it than most, and I've never gotten sick. There are exceptions. I've heard the stories, I've read the reports about some unsavory practices at some carts, as well as a proliferation of unlicensed food vendors. But keep this in mind, at least you can see them while they prepare your food. At a restaurant, you have no idea what's going on back there. You know what you really need to worry about as a tourist? Not how sanitary the food is, but getting ripped off at a food truck. Because if the vendor does not list his prices, I have heard so many stories from all of you about getting charged $50 for 2 hot dogs and 2 Cokes. So if the price is not listed, make sure to ask before you order. New York can be one of the most expensive trips of your life if you don't do your homework. I mean, if you blindly just book things during the Christmas period, you're gonna spend more money on your hotel in one night than probably your flight costs. And the 2 biggest expenses you'll run into are airfare and lodging here. After that, you can make it work with a moderate budget. But for airfare, the best thing I can tell you is to pick an off season to visit. It's early March as we film this, and it's almost 60 degrees. I had to take my jacket off. Picking the shoulder seasons to visit is one of the best ways to save money on flights. The other being if you can get reward points through credit cards or frequent flyer miles. Also realizing that there's 3 area airports that you can fly into, Newark in New Jersey, LaGuardia, and JFK in Queens. And I say pick whichever one is the cheapest, because in the end, it really doesn't matter that much which airport you fly into. For hotels, the best tip I can give you is don't stay in Midtown Manhattan, or better yet, avoid Manhattan entirely. I have a good friend who's visiting soon with his kids. He's staying in South Brooklyn, saving a ton of money. He's gonna be walking distance to some of the best pizza in the US and under 30 minutes from Manhattan by subway. So if you are willing to stay just a little bit outside of the popular tourist areas, you are gonna save a fortune on hotels. As far as saving money on food and activities, well, I mean, you've come to the right place watching this channel. Hint, hint, we just did a video about the 50 best free things to do in New York, so definitely watch that if you want to save some money. And as far as food is concerned, we have covered so many budget, cheap eats, street food on the channel. Just look around. There's a lot of ways to save money eating out in New York. Now, going to sit-down restaurants, that is going to cost you. So what I would say is budget that in, but don't be afraid to grab some quick bites and cheap eats. This city is full of it. And while I'm not the biggest fan of them, if you absolutely must check off all the attractions of New York, getting one of the attraction passes will save you money. New York is just Manhattan. This myth really needs to die. And I'm not just talking figuratively. There are people that believe New York City only consists of Manhattan. When I moved out of Manhattan to Brooklyn almost 4 years ago, I can't tell you how many comments I got saying they were so sad I was leaving New York. And while people living in the tri-state area call Manhattan the city, it's just a figurative reference. New York City is actually 5 boroughs, and this came to pass in 1898 when New York County, which then included the Bronx, Kings County, Richmond County, and a part of Queens County were consolidated under a new city charter. Now, Manhattan does get most of the worldwide attention, which I understand. It is the icon. It's what you see in all the movies and TV shows. But you are just as much a New Yorker if you live in Forest Hills, Queens, or the South Bronx, or even Staten Island, as somebody who lives in Hell's Kitchen. And you may even hear the term outer boroughs, which refers to the 4 boroughs outside of Manhattan, but they are all still New York City. Central Park is New York's only green space. Now, I could understand how you'd come to that conclusion if you just stayed in a small bubble in Midtown. Heck, we're standing on a green space right now, the Elevated Acre, my favorite secret park in New York. And not only is Central Park not the only green space we have, but it barely cracks cracks the top 5 in New York for size. Pelham Bay Park in the Bronx is actually number 1. So while Central Park is probably the world's most famous park, it is certainly not the only one we have in New York. There are so many for you to go explore. Broadway tickets are very expensive. Broadway tickets are expensive if you only want to see the hottest shows or the newest shows. But if you have some flexibility, you can get some pretty good deals. There's always deals to be had with rush tickets, buying at the TKTS booth, or the Today Tickets app, or even just monitoring the secondary market sometimes. There's also 2 for 1 week, or better yet, see an off-Broadway show where you're always gonna save money. Except for Little Shop of Horrors. That is extremely expensive because Darren Criss and Evan Rachel Wood are in it right now. So there's exceptions to that rule too. Celebrities are everywhere. I actually think you are more likely to see a celebrity in New York than you are in LA, because in LA they're hiding in their cars, they're hiding behind large fences in front of their mansions. In New York, you'll see celebrities riding the subway. That being said, don't expect it unless you're stalking movie sites or going to a movie premiere. Heck, in my 13 years living in New York and all the years across the water in Jersey commuting in, I've seen celebrities twice. One time I saw Sean Penn walking near Port Authority, and a few years ago near my old apartment in the Village, I saw Jake Gyllenhaal walking on Houston Street. And that's many, many years here. So now you're all gonna tell me how you've seen celebrities in the comments and how it is common, but at least for me, and I think for most, don't expect it. The city never sleeps. Compared to most US cities, New York is the city that never sleeps. Well, it's the city that goes to bed later at least. Although I will say since COVID-19, a lot of that has changed. Many famous spots like Katz's Deli, Veselka, even many McDonald's do not stay open 24 hours anymore. So is New York really the city that never sleeps still? I would say no, but a lot of things are open late, and delis and bodegas, well, those are always gonna be 24/7. All New Yorkers are liberals. I like to stay away from politics on the channel, and this is the one time I'm gonna get into it without giving any of my personal views. New York does have an extremely liberal reputation worldwide, rightfully so. But just as an example, Lee Zeldin, a conservative Republican, won 30% of New York City's vote in his unsuccessful bid to win the New York State governorship less than 2 years ago, which was the highest amount for a Republican in 20 years. Almost 40% of Queens and 66% of Staten Island voted for Zeldin. So while the majority of New Yorkers are Democrats, not all New Yorkers are liberals. New York is all skyscrapers. Well, from where I'm standing right here, it might appear so, but if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you'll have seen us filming outside of Midtown Manhattan and Lower Manhattan, where the vast majority of skyscrapers actually are. Most people who live in New York aren't surrounded by skyscrapers on a daily basis. Sure, as a tourist, you'll be surrounded by them constantly, but according to Wikipedia, as of July of last year, New York has 316 completed skyscrapers that are at least 492 feet in height, more than any other city in the Western Hemisphere and third in the world behind Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So yes, New York has the most skyscrapers in North America, but there's plenty of locations where the only skyscrapers you'll see will be far away in the distance. The water is unsafe to drink. Now, I wouldn't recommend you go swimming in the East River or the Hudson River, but New York City's tap water, I think it's an unfair rap. New York gets its drinking water from 19 reservoirs and 3 controlled lakes spread across a nearly 2,000 square mile watershed. That watershed is located upstate in portions of the Hudson Valley and Catskill Mountains that are as far as 125 miles north of the city. In fact, the state is so confident in that water quality that the Department of Environmental Conservation has called it the champagne of drinking water. I don't think I would toast with New York City tap water during New Year's Eve, but it is quite safe to drink. This one really gets under my skin. New Yorkers only wear black. It's impossible to live in New York without a high-paying job. I would say it's impossible to live in New York in a trendy neighborhood without a high-paying job unless your parents or somebody else is paying your rent. So many newcomers arrive here and they have 3 roommates. Like, I lived with my twin brother to save money for 8 years in the Village. Or scary enough, they don't live below 14th Street or in Williamsburg and have to commute 30 minutes to get into Manhattan. Prices tend to go down a lot if you're willing to concede your own place or live outside of the popular areas. But it is still expensive versus other US cities. I will not deny that. New York is just a place you visit. To quote Fran Lebowitz, no one can afford to live in New York, yet 8 million people do. How do we do this? We don't know. If you really want to live here, you find a way. And you sacrifice space or location for all the amenities you get here until you find it too much of a hassle to continue doing so. Because hundreds of people leave New York every single day fed up with living here. And for many, there's no other place in the world they would ever consider calling home, and we call them New Yorkers.
New York has many iconic places to eat, but are they actually worth it? Today we'll take you to some Big Apple classics and see whether or not they live up to the hype and if you should skip them or not. Here we go. I got Mike here, born and raised New Yorker, and we're starting this journey at Russ and Daughters, and this is pretty much as famous as it gets for a New York bagel and New York appetizing store.
Yeah, this may be the oldest bagel shop in New York. 109 years, classic New York.
This is on a lot of tourists and locals' radar, and we're gonna see if it lives up to that hype right now. Let's get in there.
Let's go.
I think this is the first time I have not seen a line down the block here. How do you feel walking into Russ and Daughters?
You know, this is like what I grew up in. Like, stores looked like this, they felt like this. You don't see much of it anymore.
No, appetizing stores are a dying thing in this city. Like, this is a throwback, just seeing all the fresh fish that you can buy right here, appetizing items here. And amazingly, it's mostly young people in here. That's what impresses me the most. A lot of young people.
They know better.
They do. I get 2 classic bagel and lox. I want to do everything bagel with scallion cream cheese. Gotta get the Nova. That's it. All right, we got our prize right here. Heavy bagels. We got their classic right here, $17. This may be one of New York's most expensive bagels, okay? We got Nova salmon, we got scallion cream cheese, we got it on an everything bagel. I'll give you your half. You told me you've actually never done the Nova before.
No, never the Nova. So.
All right, well, first time for you and 50th time for me.
There you go.
Let's try this. I love the Nova salmon smoky flavor. Different than your typical belly lox, which is a lot saltier. I love coming here. I mean, I kind of knew my answer before I even took the first bite, but I want to know what you think.
I think you can get a lot better bagel in New York. The bagel as itself is one area they could do a lot better. Flavor's great. Bagel.
They don't make their bagels fresh here. This is my favorite lox, not my favorite bagel spot. Now imagine you combined Absolute bagels or Utopia bagels with this Nova salmon. It'd be like an Avengers level bagel.
You go one place to get the bagel.
Yeah.
You go one place to get the cream cheese.
Yeah.
You go one place to get the Nova, and then you put it all together in your kitchen.
It won't come cheap. Like, we saw some of their options in there. You can get caviar cream cheese. You could make the most expensive bagel in New York just going in there if you wanted. You want to get like old school Jewish stuff? This is what the Lower East Side used to be like 100 years ago. They were full of places like Russ and Daughters. And now this is one of the last ones standing. That's why I think you have to come here. I'm gonna say worth it, even though it's expensive, because this Nova salmon is fantastic and this place has a lot of history. What do you think?
I'm gonna be on the not side.
Just because you're saying without a really good bagel, this doesn't work for you.
I'm saying this is halfway there.
Okay.
So like, to be an absolute come try, like halfway there doesn't get it for me.
I'm still gonna stand by my rating, because coming to Russ and Daughters, you're here for the appetizing stuff, you're here for the fish, you're not here for the bagels. Bagels are just the medium, not the message, okay? The message is the fish.
Good. Great would be an amazing bagel. That would be great.
You know, I'm gonna throw you on the spot. A block away, Katz's, what do you think?
Trash.
Whoa!
That may be one of the most overrated places in all of New York City.
I actually do think that Katz's is overrated. I don't think it's trash. I don't think it's a bad pastrami sandwich. I just don't know if it's worth all the hype. Other spots debatable, but Katz's, I'm a Sarge's fan. I've always said it, Sarge's still my top pick.
Mike, I think when you ask most tourists, they're gonna say Nathan's is the go-to for a hot dog. But you talk to locals and Gray's Papaya is always in the conversation.
Absolutely. For decades and decades, it's been an institution here in New York. We were talking about earlier how we used to go there coming out of clubs at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is now the last surviving location.
Let's check this out.
Let's go.
Places like this never change. The prints, the tropical vibes.
I'm gonna buy a t-shirt today. I didn't realize they sell t-shirts. So that's the other thing, is I was here the other day, somebody was ordering breakfast. I was like, breakfast?
You could do breakfast here,
Yeah.
Only for a very short window.
Yeah?
One just with ketchup, one with
you too, boss.
onion, mustard, sauerkraut, 2 papaya drinks. Nicholas Gray opened Gray's Papaya in 1973. This is not the first of the tropical hot dog chains of New York. Actually, Papaya King's been around way longer.
I still like Gray's better.
Okay.
Not much different.
Honestly,
Similar
they're
shit.
so similar. Show people what you got.
So I got your basic with ketchup. I know this is gonna drive the internet crazy, but what I like.
All right, internet, if you got a problem with Mike's order, feel free to say something.
Yep.
I went maybe a little more classic New York. I got onion, mustard, sauerkraut. Can't go wrong with either of this. All right, let's take a bite of this. Here we go, man.
Yeah.
Man, this tastes the same always to me. Like nice snap, any time of day. This is great. I don't know. I'm just such a fan of Gray's Papaya. And then topped off with a tropical drink, the papaya. This has been around for 50 years. I think for a good reason. How's yours? Man, oh my.
I love it. I love it.
Clearly love it, man. You're almost done.
Almost done. One more bite.
How many bites could you finish that in? 2? 3?
Probably 3.
What do you like about the hot dogs here?
It's been the same quality. Even when they had multiple locations across the city, it was always the same, regardless of which one you went in. And even now, it's still the same thing. It's a lot more expensive.
What do you think about that? Like comparing Gray's to a street hot dog? We're gonna get viewers who want to do either or.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's people that eat dollar pizza. I don't recommend it. Take yourself on the subway, right up here. Literally, the subway's right there. And come get the best hot dog in New York City.
So for you, this is the best. It's absolutely.
Oh, not even close.
I actually do have a hot dog I like better. I like Billy's hot dog stand next to Central Park. I've covered him in quite a few videos. Not a huge difference, but the experience is different. Like come here for like the tropical, kitschy vibe, local New York. Go to Billy's, you want to talk to a local who's been there forever, you want to have a little conversation. So here's a question for you. Gray's Papaya, worth it or not?
Oh, absolutely. No question. Don't come to New York and not come here.
I'm going to agree. I think hot dog is a hot dog, but going to Gray's Papaya, definitely an experience, especially for a first-time New Yorker. Great location here, as he said, 72nd Street, not expensive. Get a papaya drink, get a t-shirt. Can you show us that t-shirt,
Oh man, yeah. Oh look, the best hot dog over 100 million served. I agree.
That's the kind of shirt you can see selling for 50 bucks at some thrift store too.
We should do that. We should get some t-shirts, bring them to California, and sell them in thrift shops.
For the record, this is the first and the last Gray's Papaya in New York. They closed the one that was in the Village for a long time. And Mike, you said you used to go there late night?
I'm highly, highly upset about the fact that it is not open, because there has not been one successful business in that location since this place closed. Stand up. But I used to
true.
do that every night. That would be late night. The recession special, 2 hot dogs and a drink were under $2. Hot dogs were 50 cents. Amazing.
Could you imagine if they had alcohol in here? The place would be, line would be down the block, man. All right, Mike, we've got Juniors. They have been around since 1950. Dare I say world famous for their cheesecake. And they're still here when everything around us in downtown Brooklyn has changed.
Yeah, so before I created content, I actually did real estate. And they got offered tens of millions of dollars to sell this location. And they were like, nah, cheesecake's gotta be good, right?
If you're here that long, we're gonna see if they live up to the hype.
How you doing?
Good.
3?
We taking pictures or video?
Yeah, we were doing like a,
YouTube?
yeah.
Hey, YouTube.
This place is old school as they come. You want that retro diner vibe? Come to Juniors. I think what a lot of tourists don't realize is that Juniors has a full menu. This is like coming to an old school diner.
Diner in here. Like, do you want Hungarian beef goulash? This is what I came to Brooklyn for.
I will give them credit. They have quite an extensive cheesecake menu. Diabetic-friendly cheesecake, coconut lemon layer cheesecake, raspberry swirl cheesecake.
I'm gonna have, without a doubt, the original cheesecake.
I'm gonna do the chocolate mousse cheesecake.
That looks good.
It's a big piece of cheesecake.
Damn.
Thank you. Look at that.
Thank you.
So this is my second time ever here. I got the classic cheesecake last time. I went for the chocolate mousse. I'm gonna get a little bit of cheesecake, a little bit of chocolate in one bite. That's not bad. I'll be honest. It's not like I take a bite and I'm blown away by this cheesecake, but there are some things I like about it. Spongy bottom, soft. It's a cheesecake. I mean, that's what I would say, but I'm not overly impressed by it, to be honest. I want to see your opinion of the original. Let's see.
Yeah. It's all right. I mean, it's not where I would come for cheesecake, personally.
Yeah. What a New York cheesecake is it has to have Philadelphia cream cheese.
Yeah.
That is the difference maker. So maybe it's something that you can't find in other cities. So you could come for that novelty, perhaps. You can get this in Costco in Idaho. They sell Junior's cheesecake, or you could use Goldbelly. I think this is the world's most famous cheesecake. Is it the world's best cheesecake? No. I'll ask you. You already said it. Worth it or not?
No. Go somewhere else.
I'm gonna say not worth it. My favorite, Eileen's special cheesecake. I would send you there in a heartbeat. I do like the vibe here. I like how it looks, but as far as the cheesecake for taste and flavor, nah. I think both of us agree that you can do better.
I don't want to throw it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish mine.
I don't know that I'm gonna finish mine, but you know.
I've also heard that the red velvet is very popular here, so I think our take would be, if you did end up at Junior's in Midtown or here, go for one of the flavored ones. All right, Mike, if people want to find you, they want to follow your food adventures, your adventures in the tri-state, where do they go?
It's your boy Mike Official on pretty much every social network.
What do you do on there? What do you think you're known for?
I create food, experience, family, and travel content, New York City and beyond.
Check them out, link in the description.
Did you know the average visitor to NYC ends up feeling overwhelmed because they're afraid of making mistakes? So in this video, I'm gonna tell you 11 things you should never do in the Big Apple, how you can use this knowledge to have a better trip and feel more like a local and less like a tourist. Here we go. Traveling without this in New York is like eating a huge plate of spaghetti in Little Italy with a white shirt on and no bib. And I'm guilty of this mistake myself, and that's forgetting to have some hand sanitizer with you at all times. Let's face it, New York is a dirty place. We've got 8 million people roaming about, and when you're doing things like riding the subway, it can get pretty icky. And a lot of times you're on the run. Maybe you're popping into a bodega or pizza spot which won't have a bathroom open to clean up. Take matters into your own hands and make sure at least one person in your group always has a small hand sanitizer with them. And the great thing is that even if you forget it, you can buy them at any small little stand in the city. And speaking of buying things from small stands, later on in this video, I'm gonna reveal one of the biggest tourist scams that most visitors don't even realize happens to them. Not tipping properly. Now, this tends to drive my non-North American viewers crazy. A general rule of thumb at restaurants in New York is tip 20% as long as the service was decent on your pre-tax bill total. At a coffee shop, I like to leave $1 if someone's making me a latte, for example. Fast food places, you really don't need to tip. If you want to drop $1 in the tip jar if you have a good interaction, feel free. But if you get one of those terminals that asks you to leave a tip, don't feel pressured to do it if it's for something fast. Like I was at a cafe a few weeks ago and I ordered a water for $1.50 and it asked if I wanted to leave an additional tip and I said no. And the person working there was not angry at me. For tourists specifically, taking a taxi, I'd lean on a 20% tip, assuming everything went well. Same with an Uber. Bellman at a hotel who takes your bags, I'd say $2 per bag is sufficient. At a bar, I like to pay $1 per drink. Now, if you're paying as you go, make sure that you tip after every drink you pay with cash. If you're doing something called opening up a tab, then you're gonna tip at the end and you just have to tell the bartender, I want to close out, which is something that I actually don't see outside of North America, that terminology, so it's good to know. Avoid trying the local classics. I want to challenge all of you out there to do something. Yes, eat your share of pizza and bagels, the obvious stuff, but I also want you to seek out foods that only local and dare I say, old-time New Yorkers really appreciate. If you want a real New York experience, go to Ray's Candy Shop, and if you're lucky enough to see Ray Alvarez, who's 90 years young, order an egg cream. Or go to Jonas Schimmel's and order a knish, which used to be all over the city in street food carts and are much tougher to find now. Or to top all this off, if you saw our Anthony Bourdain video, go eat breakfast at Barney Greengrass on the Upper West Side, order a sturgeon platter or Nova salmon on a bagel, a real appetizing experience from the past. You won't find stuff like this anywhere else. Doing any of these is like knowing the secret handshake to an elite club. Not planning properly. Now, I can tell you to watch every single video on my channel, but you probably don't have a week to sift through 500 plus different pieces of content. And many viewers have hit me up asking me if I do trip planning, itineraries, schedules, things like that. And it's just not a service I offer. But the good news is we've partnered with AskKansu.com to help you out with that important planning. Now, they're a travel service created by a team of local New Yorkers who tailor custom itineraries for visitors to save them time and help them enjoy more things they love. From restaurant recommendations to live performances and hotel picks. They're a team of lifelong New Yorkers. They know sports, they know where to eat with kids. They even have a vintage store expert on board, an LGBTQ plus insider, and a hotel expert with over 10 years in New York hotel management. Visit this site here to check out their free day planning tool. It's super lightweight and easy. Just add the activities you want to visit to see where they're located so you can group them and plan your days, which is something I always encourage you to do anyway. And for the last minute planners out there, they sell 10 pre-built NYC plans based on popular travel types for one low price of $19.99. And each plan comes with a full itinerary to download and print and a digital map of highlighted activities for transit directions. Visit AskKansu.com/HereBeBarr and you'll save 10% off of your purchase. Be prepared on your next trip to New York with Ask Kansu. Getting into confrontations with strangers. Now, a lot has been made on the media about the increase of crime in New York. And in many of these reports, you tend to see there was some kind of an argument or a confrontation before somebody got assaulted. And the reality of traveling in a big city is that you will encounter mental illness and people under the influence of drugs potentially on a daily basis, especially if you're in Midtown Manhattan or taking the subway. Now, the vast majority of you will have no incident, but in case anybody tries to instigate anything with you, don't engage them. In my 12 years of living here, I've had a few situations where somebody got mad at me, for example, for ignoring them. Keep walking. If you're on the subway, switch cars at the next stop. If someone's blasting music or being rude, this is not the place to correct their behavior because you don't know what their mental state is, how they react, or what they're carrying on them. It's not worth your time to get into fights with people who have less to lose than you unless it is an absolute last resort. Making these subway mistakes. Now, there's so many potential mistakes a first-timer can make on the subway that we have an entire video dedicated to this, but just in case, I want to highlight some of the more popular ones. One would be boarding an empty subway car during regular hours and it either smells like somebody died in there or the air conditioner isn't working and it's hotter than the sun. We'll add the obvious, not moving in when the subway is crowded to give people more space, and don't even think about blocking the doors when the subway comes to a stop and those doors open. And it's not considered good practice, or very sanitary for that matter, to eat a meal on the subway. Although I don't know what possibly would inspire you to do such a thing, but I'm just gonna throw it out there. Mispronouncing famous streets or subway stops. Now, if you really want to impress the locals here, if you can nail all of these pronunciations, you're gonna be a step ahead. I think the most commonly mispronounced street in all of New York City is this one. How would you pronounce it? It's pronounced Houston Street, named after William Houston, who was a delegate from the state of Georgia to the Continental Congress. Another neighborhood you're likely to explore is this one, pronounced Greenwich Village, not Greenwich Village. And if you go to the High Line, you may enter on Gansevoort Street. Now, for extra credit, I want you to try pronouncing this for me. This is the name of a subway station. How would you say it? If you said Hoyt Schermerhorn, you would be incorrect. The proper pronunciation is Hoyt Skimmerhorn, and I have even messed that up on a video in the past, so Many of us are guilty of that one. And for the record, there is no such thing as the Lower West Side of Manhattan, and most locals refer to it as Lower Manhattan, not downtown Manhattan, although you can be heading in the downtown direction in Manhattan or heading uptown. I have to say, I think I may have found the coolest basketball hoop location in the world. That person has a hoop on their apartment rooftop overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. Not engaging enough with local New Yorkers that you encounter on your trip. And I'm talking about tour bus drivers, taxi drivers, restaurant workers, people at the hotels, even New Yorkers that you just encounter striking up a conversation with. So many locals in the service industries here have stories upon stories and tips that I can't even offer you. When I travel, sometimes the best advice I've ever received are from the taxi driver or the Uber driver who picked me up from the airport. Heck, my wife Adriana told me a story about how in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the Uber driver that her and her friends got one day gave them a tip about a restaurant which they visited 3 times during that trip and she still dreams about. So don't be afraid to strike up conversations with local New Yorkers that you encounter during your travel here, because you're just a wealth of information. And despite the negative stereotypes, most local New Yorkers are extremely helpful if you're in need. Renting a car. If you think you need a car on a trip to New York City, especially if you're staying in Manhattan, I gotta tell you, I think you're crazy. Even if you're anti-public transit, just taking Ubers and taxis would make more sense financially and be a lot less stressful. Then let's factor in post-COVID the addition of outdoor dining facades taking up tons of parking spots. And we've got congestion pricing coming here in 2024. And we talk about this on our last video about price raises. Between parking tickets, paying for garages, you are looking at a big old pile of hassle. Renting a car in Manhattan is like ordering a salad at a steakhouse. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. The exception to this would be if you're extending a trip to other cities or other parts of the United States, then renting a car to leave the city would make perfect sense. Not having a plan for rain or extremes in the weather. Now, I've harped on this time and time again about having your New York City ideas split up into different parts of the city: Upper Manhattan, Midtown, Lower Manhattan, and the outer boroughs. You always have to be prepared for inclement weather here because it's just so unpredictable. I'd have a list of your top museum choices, shopping areas, restaurants, shows on or off Broadway, ready to go in case we get a few days of rain, an epic heat wave, a brutal cold snap. You just don't know what you're gonna get. And my favorite times of year here when people ask, I always say May and October tend to be the best 2 months for weather. This little scam is so widespread that most tourists don't even know that it happened to them. We've mentioned this on the channel many times, but I'm gonna repeat it again and again for my new viewers. It's not asking for the price of street food before you order it if it's not listed there. And it still amazes me to this day how many street food trucks in New York don't have their prices listed on the outside. And if you order food without that price showing, a lot of times the vendor is gonna charge you whatever he thinks he can get away with, like paying $10 to $20 for a hot dog. And I realize there's people visiting from overseas who don't know what a New York street hot dog is worth. Maybe you think it's worth $20. I have the utmost respect for most of the street food vendors in New York. So many of them are honest, hardworking people, but there's just a few bad apples out there, and I am so tired of hearing these stories from you guys, so be on the lookout for that.
Millions of tourists visit New York every year, and the biggest question is how to budget your limited time. Today, I'll be ranking the city's most popular attractions and telling you the pros and cons of each so you can decide which ones to visit. You don't want to miss it. After going through hundreds of first-timers' itineraries, these are the 20 attractions I tend to see come up the most, and my criteria here is value for your money, value for your time, and how unique it is in New York. At number 20, Madame Tussauds. Probably no shock here. I think the reason this spot is so popular is because it's on a lot of those attraction passes and the fact that it's in Midtown Manhattan. Let's look at the pros, and I understand why you'd go here, especially if you're visiting from overseas and you're a fan of American pop culture. I guess it would look cool posing next to realistic wax dummies of your favorite celebrities, and because it's on those attraction passes, it's probably included in the cost. If you're in Midtown anyway and traveling with kids, it could be interesting. The cons, where to begin? First off, there's 23 of these around the world, so you could do this in a lot of other cities. This honestly feels more like an LA kind of thing to me. Also, there's very little New York experiences inside. They have this replica subway station, but outside of that, I hate to use the term, but this spot is a bit of a tourist trap, and that's why it's last on my list. Up next, Coney Island, Brooklyn, and I'm not talking about the businesses in the neighborhood, I'm just talking about the amusement park and boardwalk. So for the pros, this is a cool spot for families, and if you're visiting New York and want that American boardwalk experience, you could scratch that itch here. It's also home to the first Nathan's in the world, which is actually one of the cons in my opinion, because I think Nathan's is overrated and not worth the trek just to Coney Island for that. Also, unless you're a huge fan of amusement parks, it is a hike from Midtown Manhattan. You're eating up 1 hour each way to get there, and it's really only lively during the summer. Yes, they do have a Winterfest now, which was pretty cool, so we will give an exception to that rule, but it's really not a year-round place to visit. And I may be biased here because I grew up in Jersey and like their boardwalk so much more, but if time is tight, I just don't think this is a must-do for first-timers. And their beach is nothing special. I'd pick Rockaway Beach, Queens over Coney Island any day. The Circle Line Harbor Lights Cruise, one of the most popular tourist boats out there, and at $52, here's what you need to know. The pros. I actually was impressed by the narrator of the ride. He was a native New Yorker, and he even taught me some facts that I didn't even know about. And just cruising around the Statue of Liberty and the East River at night, that was really amazing and totally worthy of all the photos and videos that you'd want to take. Now the cons. These things are absolutely mobbed with other tourists, so you'll be competing for the best seats if you don't get there like an hour early, and probably selfie sticks as well, because keep in mind, they're on all the attraction passes. Also, there's a lot of other boat rides that are less crowded and take similar routes. Heck, you could take the $4 NYC ferry and recreate most of the route yourself. Hint, hint, we did an entire video on this topic. I just find this thing really touristy, and there's a lot of other boat rides you could take that, in my opinion, pack in more value. Number 17, Little Island. This is one of the newest attractions on the list, and it's on most tourists' radar because of its Manhattan location right on the water. Pros, it's free, and that's always a win. And I like the quirky, surrealistic design from the outside. It's also in front of the port where the Titanic survivors arrive, which is really cool. It's right next to the High Line as well, so you could easily package the two together. Now the cons. I don't actually find the inside of Little Island that interesting. The views are only okay of the skyline. It can get a bit crowded as well. That being said, I'd still consider a quick peek inside if you have the time and are visiting attractions near the meatpacking district anyway, but this is not even close to my favorite free thing to do in New York. In fact, if you want a whole list of free things to do in the city, check out the video we made on the topic. And if you're curious, my #1 free attraction in New York is the rooftop of the Stavros and the Archos Library. Number 16, Times Square. And if you know absolutely nothing else about New York, you probably heard of Times Square. It's honestly the center of the world, and it's on every single first-timer's checklist for obvious reasons. The pros. I admit at night going to Times Square is a requirement. The bright lights, the billboards, the vibe is distinctly New York. Before Vegas, this was probably the shiniest place in the US. I also enjoy the Midnight Moment, which occurs every night on the billboards around midnight and is the world's largest digital art display. On to the cons. There's a reason why most local New Yorkers steer clear of this spot unless they have family or friends visiting. It's super crowded all the time, packed full of tourists taking photos, and almost every single scam I've ever talked about is present here, from the fake monks to the CD guys, the Disney characters, and people trying to hand you pamphlets and sell you stuff at every corner. It's honestly a nuisance to walk through. I still recommend going at least once because you'll probably be in Midtown Manhattan at some point anyway. Number 15, Rockefeller Center. Now, Rockefeller Center is synonymous with New York during the holidays, although people do visit it year-round. The pros. This is the holiday headquarters of New York because most of the Christmas attractions are nearby, starting with a Christmas tree and famous ice skating rink, which I admit is super iconic. Any time of year, they keep the area relatively clean and manicured, so it wouldn't hurt to walk by even during non-holiday times. On to the cons.
Well, for one, if it's not between late November and early January, it's just not super exciting. And when you visit during the holidays, it is a mob scene the closer to Christmas you get. This year, they were even charging people money to get closer to the tree. So just remember, it's one of the most famous Christmas destinations in the world, and everybody else wants to get in there too. And beware of costume characters and rogue Santas charging money for photos there. Number 14, One World Observatory. Pros, it's near the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, so you could easily combine those on an itinerary. For another, it's the only observation deck that is completely indoors, so if it's super cold out or windy, you'll be fine there. And it has by far the best elevator ride of any observation deck, as it shows you the construction of New York right in front of your eyes. You also have incredible views of the surrounding region, and being at the bottom of Manhattan, it's the only one with a good view of the Statue of Liberty. The cons. Well, that pro about being indoors is also one of its cons, in that I really prefer being outside for at least part of a viewing experience. Also, you are not in Midtown Manhattan, so you won't have that same experience being surrounded by big buildings on all sides. This one comes down to preference, and I just like the other observation decks a bit more. Number 13, the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. And this is literally housed on a decommissioned aircraft carrier, which already makes it super interesting in my book. The pros, if you're a fan of military history, this could be number one on your list. Admission is $36, which is cheaper than any observation deck. They have tons of old aircraft on the decks and even a replica of the Enterprise space shuttle. And now you can even board the old British Airway Concorde, which traveled across the Atlantic in under 3 hours. I really enjoyed the Growler submarine as well. It felt like I was living at sea. As for the cons, the biggest one for me is if you don't like military history, it won't excite you. And even if you do, there's also 5 aircraft carrier museums in the US. So while it's super cool, it's not the most unique thing to do in New York, but I'm still a big fan. Number 12, the Edge Sky Deck, another observation deck on the list, and we actually went to its grand opening back in March 2020. This is the tallest outdoor observation deck in the Western Hemisphere. As for the pros, it's one of the most unique observation decks. I love the angled glass panels which you can lean on. Also the way it's set up, I really feel like I'm just walking over the city more than any other observatory. And the location on the west side of Manhattan gives you a cool vantage point that none of the other decks do. And it has City Climb if you're willing to shell out $185 to literally lean off a building. My palms get sweaty just thinking about that. As for the cons, for that same reason, it's not one of my favorites because I love being in the middle of the concrete jungle at the 3 Midtown Manhattan observation decks. I've also heard some complaints about crowds there, as it's just one long deck and not spread out over multiple areas like some of the other ones on the list. Number 11, the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge is one of the top free things to do in New York, I'll admit. And the first pro is it's really beautiful and iconic. Keep in mind, this was the longest suspension bridge in the world when it was completed in 1883. The views are outstanding. It's an amazing walk, although I recommend taking the ferry over to Dumbo and then walking back to get those skyline views. So you could even bike this, although those lanes are kind of narrow. Beware if you're not a confident cyclist. As for the cons, the biggest con is that it gets absolutely mobbed with tourists. So I recommend trying to do this early in the day if you want to get the best photo opportunities. Another issue here is you can't see the Brooklyn Bridge from the Brooklyn Bridge, so keep that in mind. Number 10, the High Line. And the High Line is one of my favorite free attractions in New York. It's an elevated park on what used to be freight train tracks. The pros, I am such a fan of this because, as I said, it's free and I actually love walking it. You don't have to do the whole thing to enjoy it. There's a lot of exits. Anytime I'm in the area, I just hop on and stare at some of the art or views of the city. Even walking 5 to 10 minutes of it is worth it for me, although you could walk from Meatpacking all the way to Hudson Yards, which I recommend if it's your first time in the city. As for the cons, I don't have too many to list here. It can get super swarmed with people depending on when you go, and being outdoors, it is quite weather dependent. Number 9, the Empire State Building. The Empire State is one of New York's biggest icons, and as far as buildings are concerned, it's one of my favorites, but we're here to discuss their observation deck experience. The pros, if you're into Art Deco architecture, the interior of the building is absolutely a marvel. I always admire it as I walk around. I also like some of the additions, the cool exhibits like the King Kong one, and some extra New York history that you can learn about. The elevator ride up is really neat, seeing the old school construction workers. The cons, well, the biggest con is that you can't see the Empire State Building from the Empire State Building. Also, I don't love the steel bars at the top. It creates a bit more of an obstructed view. They have the option to go to the 102nd floor, creating a 2-for-1 experience. But for an extra 35 bucks, I don't think it's worth it, especially if you've already been to One World Observatory. Finally, this is probably the most popular observation deck in the world, so expect crowds. Number 8, Central Park. We're going from the most famous building in the world to probably the most famous park in the world. Pros, there's just so many to mention. Besides being a free place to just relax and people watch, it's got so many little hidden attractions inside. We shot an entire guide to the park, which you should watch, but some of my favorite places to hang out are Sheep's Meadow and the Conservatory Garden on the northern side of the park. You can't go wrong just wandering about either and getting lost. It's truly an amazing place. Cons, I don't have too many for Central Park, except that some of the areas get really busy during peak seasons. Also, if you're not a fan of horse-drawn carriages, you will see that, and be careful with pedicabs. I advise setting a rate first, otherwise you'll be on the hook for $3 to $7 a minute. Do the math, it could cost you as much as your plane ticket or hotel room. Number 7, the American Museum of Natural History, and this is one of those classic museums that is certainly worth a trip for anyone. The pros, at $28 for non-residents, I think it's an amazing value. We recently visited the newly opened Gilder Center wing, and if you're traveling with young kids, it's so hands-on and interesting. I think any of them would like it. If you're a fan of science and the natural world, you could literally spend an entire day here going through their exhibits. Also, if you're into dinosaur fossils, this is one of the best places in the entire world to see them. Cons, the only major con I could really say would be if you're not into science, and you probably wouldn't enjoy this very much. And they've disbanded their Pay What You Wish program for non-tri-state area residents, so you will pay full price if you're not from New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut. Number 6, Top of the Rock, and this is one of my all-time favorite observation decks. Of all the observation decks, because of its location, you really feel like you're immersed around Midtown Manhattan. It's on the 67th, 69th, and 70th floors, so you don't feel like you're looking down on the city, but more part of it. I also like that there's 3 different floors, so it spreads out the traffic a lot. And when I visited all 5 decks in one day, this one had the smallest crowds. They've also recently added the Beam, a new attraction for $25 extra, where you sit on a beam and get twirled around like the famous photo Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. As for the cons, there's not too many here. Some would argue because it's the lowest observation deck, you won't get the same bird's eye view of the city. If you really want to be standing high, then you'd probably like One World Observatory more. Number 5, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of the top art museums on the planet and one of the cultural meccas of New York. Honestly, there are too many pros even to mention here. You can see anything from ancient Greek sculptures to Van Gogh to the Harlem Renaissance. There's so many genres on display. The Temple of Dender, an ancient Egyptian temple built in the 1st century BC, has been on display here for 50 years. These are the reasons you come to New York, to see things like this. And it's no shock to get around 7 million visitors a year. If you want a quick guide on how to see the Met in just 2 hours, watch the video we shot here with my old art history professor. Cons, the most obvious is if you're not into art, you probably want to skip this. Also, the cost at $30 for general admission. It is the most expensive museum in New York City, and they also did away with the Pay What You Wish program unless you're a resident of the tri-state area or a student. Number 4, see a Broadway show. As far as I'm concerned, seeing a Broadway show is a must for any first-timers. You are getting the best of the best on stage here in New York. The greatest pro of Broadway is that there's every type of show out there, from stuff your kids would like, to serious dramas, to fun musicals. There's usually at least 3 or 4 shows at any given time that I would even love to go see if I had the chance. Back to the Future, I'm looking at you. So if you get a chance to see it, let me know how it is.
Tickets are the greatest con of Broadway because many of the most popular shows are extremely expensive or even sold out. I always talk about ways around this, like going to the TKTS booth in Midtown Manhattan or trying to do rush tickets, but because these theaters are small, there's just some shows that are red hot where there's almost no way to avoid paying your mortgage for a few seats. And if money is really a factor, I'd say consider an off-Broadway or off-Broadway show to get that fix in, because the majority of those actors are amazing and have trained their whole lives as well. Number 3, Summit One Vanderbilt, which is the newest observation deck in New York, my personal favorite. The pros, well, since it's the newest, if it's a return trip, you probably haven't done it yet. I think I just got bored with the whole observation deck concept of going to stare at other buildings, but here you have 2 floors of all glass. That's more of an interactive experience. There's other cool rooms as well and spots to look down at the city. And of course, they have a rooftop where you can get those classic views on the 93rd floor, plus an extra elevator ride up if you really want to soar 12 stories higher. I just can't think of any observation deck that blends the traditional with this much interaction. The cons, some people may find Summit a bit too gimmicky or distracting you from your main purpose of just looking out at other buildings. And if you just want a pure observation deck, then Top of the Rock would probably be better for you. I've also gotten some reports that it has been overcrowded during peak tourist periods. Number 2, the Statue of Liberty, the symbol of American freedom. This may be New York's biggest icon. The pros. I actually had not visited the statue till about 4 years ago, and it truly left a mark on me. Not just seeing it from the boat and imagining how many immigrants from around the world saw it when they arrived in New York for the first time, but just being up close and personal with it. I also highly recommend you buy tickets way in advance to get crown access. Of all the tourist things I've ever done in New York, and I've done every single one on this list, going inside the crown by far took my breath away the most. To see the statue and how it was designed, like a VIP behind the scenes, you just can't put a price tag on that, but we will since it's $31.80. You also get access to Ellis Island with any statue ticket, which tells a story of New York as an immigration hub and is well worth at least an extra hour. Make sure to book tickets on Statue Cruises' website, the official vendor, and not a ripoff site, and be aware of scams close to the statue port in Battery Park. They even have warnings up reminding you to buy it only from the official vendor, Statue Cruises. Cons, well, there aren't many cons to the Statue of Liberty. I would say that if you are buying crown access and you have mobility issues, the stairway is very narrow, so it probably wouldn't be for you. Also, if you're afraid of heights, I probably would avoid going to the crown because of said stairwell. I've also been hearing from fellow guides that the lines to board the boats have been extremely long lately, so make sure to arrive early, which brings us to the other issue. Going to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island will eat up at least half a day. And if you only have 1 or 2 days in the city, this may be too much time to budget for it. So if you have other things you'd really rather see, then the statue may not make sense on a short trip. At the top of our list is the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, located in Lower Manhattan. I think this is a must for every visitor to New York, as that day changed this city and country so much. The pros, the memorial fountains are free to visit and located right outside of the museum. I can't think of a more morose place to visit in the city, but it's important to pay your respects to all the victims of that horrible day. And please, no smiling selfies here. I will admit I had never been inside of the museum until about a month ago when I had friends in town, and I have to say, it really affected me on a deep level, bringing back memories from 20+ years ago. And as I walked around, I realized that those who didn't live through it or remember it owe it to themselves to find out about that historical moment in time that defined and strengthened New York. It was really, really eye-opening. The only con I can think of is the museum is very realistic and it may be too much for some people. Keep that in mind, but they do have tissues at some of the exhibits. Going to Broadway is an iconic New York experience, but there's so much that can go wrong. Today we'll be sharing the biggest Broadway mistakes to avoid, from getting frustrated overpaying for tickets, the agony of choosing the wrong show, and a sneaky scam that even experienced theater goers regret falling for.
You don't want to miss this, trust me. And joining me for this special video, Billy Hipkins, a Broadway lifer.
I'm a lifer. I was in a Broadway show a long time ago. I've been working in wardrobe on Broadway for 25 years. I've worked on 32 different productions in the wardrobe department. Currently right here at the Winter Garden Theater doing Back to the Future, where I'm dressing the stars, Doc and Marty.
Billy, we are standing right in front of the doors to the theater, and I think a big fear of first-timers especially is choosing the wrong seats for a show.
Well, I would say there's a difference between seats for a musical and seats for a straight play. Now say if you're coming to Broadway to see Sandra Bullock in a play, sit down front. You want to get a good look at a celebrity, sit close. The thing is though, most stages are a little higher than your eye level, so you're going to be sitting looking up. If you're very close, you're going to see a lot of shoes. For musicals, I always like to say sit in the front of the mezzanine. Because we dance, we have patterns on the floor, so you get a better overview, and the lighting, the way it plays off the set and the floor and stuff, you're better off upstairs. The other thing I'd say is, the further to the side you are, and every theater has a seating chart. If you're on this side, you might miss what's happening up in the corner over there. You might be looking into the wings a little bit on that side. So center is always better. Further back can be a good thing on a lot of shows. Here's the other thing I'll tell you in front rows. If you can see the cast can see you. They see everything everybody does in that auditorium. So if you're gonna sit up front, you better be wide awake and attentive, because trust me, they're gonna talk about you when they walk off stage.
Now, Billy, one thing a lot of people are afraid of, prices. Broadway can be expensive, but we've got some methods for you to save money. And the first one are rush tickets, which in the past involved going to the theater the day of the show in the morning, getting in line for unsold seats. Now, some select theaters still do this, but many now have digital lotteries. And the day before the show, you enter your name on an app. In this link right here, every single show on Broadway and their rush policies are listed. So for example, Back to the Future, where Billy works, you can get $40 rush tickets at the box office day of the show, or $45 if you're lazy and want to do a digital rush.
I will tell you, most of the rush tickets are the first couple rows, so again, you're going to be looking up.
Another thing to look out for with rush tickets is typically the limit is only 2, and sometimes they even separate you from the other person.
There's also cancellation. I mean, every day there will be a line forming as soon as the box office opens, and as tickets are canceled by people rescheduled, they'll resell at full price, but they will sell some of our better seats day of. There are ways to do that if you feel like standing at the box office at any given show. On a big hit show with hot tickets, if the box office is going to open at 10, by 9, stand outside.
Something else to look out for with rush tickets is they also could be obstructed or limited view. You're basically at the mercy of the house. You could get lucky, you might not get the best seats, but you're gonna get a good price. That's the important thing.
Now they will tell you if they're obstructed view, they'll let you know that. Now here's the thing. Obstructed usually means there's a column that's going to be in your view. They'll tell you that. But in a lot of the theaters, where if you're toward the back of the orchestra, the mezzanine is over your head. You have a view of the stage, but you might miss the top of the set. So on shows where action happens way up there, further back you are, you may be obstructed in that way, that you're under the overhang of the mezzanine. That is something to ask the box office. Is any of this blocking the top of the proscenium?
The other way to get cheap tickets, and you'll see this walking through Times Square, is the TKTS booth. Going there in the morning, day of a show. They will tell you what shows they have available on their website, but you do have to line up. Could take an hour, but there are deals to be had there.
My other favorite for cheapy seats, Today Tix. Get the app, Today Tix, T-I-X, run by the Theater Development Fund. You can kind of look in advance. Now on that also, you won't be able to pick where you're sitting, but you can definitely get some decent seats at a decent price.
Now, unfortunately, something that is all too common, rip-off tickets on Broadway. Many people just don't know better. And the first thing I will say is I'd be careful about buying tickets from scalpers right outside the venue. You don't know if those seats are counterfeit or not. You don't know if that person's gonna go run away as soon as you buy the tickets. Another one that I'm hearing about lately is people who are waiting for tickets at the TKTS line. You're gonna be approached by somebody with a clipboard, and they're gonna tell you that they have better tickets if you just talk to one of their associates, and you're really just talking to a ticket scalper who's probably gonna charge you more than you would pay at the TKTS booth. And I've been reading all about this lately from you guys. And the number one issue I see my viewers running into and getting mad about out is going to a website like this. It'll have words like BroadwayTickets.com. It'll look like the official reseller, but when you actually go to the site, we have an example here, Aladdin on September 22nd, they have it starting at $104. What you always need to do instead of relying on a random Google search is go to the official box office site. We did just that, and Aladdin for the same night starts at $64.50, almost $40 cheaper. So I'm gonna repeat this, very important. Always start on the official site of the show, not some Broadway site that's gonna trick you to thinking they're the official reseller. Newbies to Broadway may be anxious about how to dress. What would you tell them?
I would tell them, we want everyone to feel welcome in a Broadway theater. You dress however you are comfortable. You are welcome here. The only thing I'm going to tell you though is we have a lot of air conditioning, so it might get cold, so you might want to consider having a jacket with you. But whatever you've got on, come on in. You're welcome here. Used to be people dressed up a lot on a Saturday night to see a show. Those days are over. Come be comfortable, come enjoy yourself. You are welcome here, whatever you got.
All right, Billy, another common issue, people arriving late. There's traffic, the subway breaks down. What do you do if you arrive late? And what time would you tell people they should arrive?
I'd say if you're picking up tickets at the box office, give yourself a half hour before the curtain so you feel comfortable. Get your tickets, you can come in, you can relax, you have time, stand outside if you want. There's gonna be a lot of people doing the same. Give yourself that time. If you've already got your tickets, give yourself 20 minutes, 15 minutes before the curtain to get in, get comfortable. If you want to use a restroom, feel free. As far as late seating, if you are late, well, we're not gonna start over, but they will seat you. Now, a lot of shows have very distinct, at the end of this number, that is a moment where we'll seat late seaters. At the end of this scene, that's when we'll seat people. You can't just go in because it is disruptive. So we've got that all very mapped out. It happens all the time. People get up during the show if they need to use a restroom. You're not going to be forbidden to do so. Do your best if you get there early to take care of all that stuff so you can just sit back and enjoy the show till the intermission or till it's over if you don't have an intermission.
And Billy, what about people who forget to turn off their cell phone?
If you can hear it, we can hear it. Don't do it. Turn off your cell phone. And while we're at it, don't think you can sneak pictures of the show or take videos. We see you. They see you. They will report it to an usher immediately and you will be ejected from the building. Don't do it. As far as singing along, don't do that. You paid good money to hear people that have been training their whole lives to do this job, not to hear each other. You're going to really annoy the people around you too.
It's not a Taylor Swift concert.
It is not a sing-along.
I think a mistake that a lot of first-timers make is thinking that all Broadway shows are actually on the street of Broadway. Now, we are standing in front of Broadway, Winter Garden Theater, right there. One of only 2 shows that are still on Broadway, literally on the street, Broadway Theater being the other, and it got the nickname Broadway because at the turn of the 20th century, every single Broadway theater was on this street. Now, it's all around the theater district. Now today, Broadway actually refers to theaters that can hold 500 or more people. An off-Broadway show is 99 to 499 seats, and off-Broadway are 99 seats or lower.
Example, Little Shop of Horrors. That is a small show. It belongs in an off-Broadway venue. It doesn't belong in a big Broadway house. There are shows that are just too big to put in an off-Broadway house. The scope of the show determines where it should sit. Your price point is lower off-Broadway, slightly, but some shows are appropriate for that venue as opposed to a bigger house. We just saw the Britney Spears Once Upon a One More Time in a monstrously big house, and they couldn't make it in a smaller house. They might have survived on Broadway. In an off-Broadway house, they might have run for years. It's impossible to say, but bigger house, more overhead.
All right, Billy, what about food and drink inside the theater? Can you bring your own food and drink? And if you don't, what can you expect price-wise inside?
You cannot bring your own food and drinks into the theater. Don't. People try to bring the rest of their pizza from John's with them. You can't bring it to your seat, folks. Eat before you get here or eat afterwards. Now, in the theater, yes, concessions. The owners of these theaters want to make money on beverages and cocktails and some snack, candy items. And it's going to be very, very expensive. But really, did you come here to eat and drink, or did you come here to see a show? I think you can go 2 hours without it. Now, there are shows where certain performers will not allow there to be ice in their drinks because they don't want to hear the clack, clack, clack of ice during the performance.
Billy, with so many options on Broadway, picking a show can be overwhelming. How do you tell a first-timer to narrow it down?
Well, now, again, it depends on what you want to see. If you've got a family, go see Lion King, go see Aladdin. We have plenty of really good family fare shows out there. If English is not your first language, something like Lion King is a very easy spectacle that you don't have to try to keep up with a plot. If you like movies, Back to the Future. It is a really great representation of the movie on the stage. If you're into something more challenging, go see a play. You might want to go see a drama. We have some wonderful moving theater that isn't musical fare, and a lot of long-standing things like Wicked, Book of Mormon. We have things that have tried and true and been around for years and years, and if you haven't seen them yet, well, there's a reason they're still here. People are loving them.
All right, putting you on the spot. What's your favorite all-time show? Can't say Back to the Future.
Favorite all-time show? Again, I'm gonna say Little Shop of Horrors. That is a quality piece of theater. I love that show. I love when people get eaten by a plant.
All right, so a lot of people, they come to the city or they're visiting here and they don't just want to go to a Broadway show. They want to get a drink after, they want to get dinner after. Where are your top picks after all these years?
You know, I do love going over by Schubert Alley on 45th Street to Junior's. Junior's is busy, it's big, but they've got great burgers. They have a brisket over potato pancakes to die, and they have killer cheesecake. I like going over to Junior's. Now, if you want to go someplace that maybe run into a Broadway performer that you just saw, I'd say Joe Allen's over on Restaurant Row on 46th Street. Joe Allen's is a place where Broadway folks will go after, and also upstairs from there is Bar Central, which is a nice place for a cocktail, where a lot of Broadway folks go hang out after a show, so you might just catch someone that you just saw on the stage.
Two of my favorites, one would be Adele's, which is halal food, just a few blocks actually from this theater right here. Now the line can get pretty long, but it's one of my favorite halal trucks in the entire city. And for food, I'm a big fan of a spot called Easy Paella and Tapas, actually in Hell's Kitchen, where you live. I think their paella and some of their Venezuelan fusion stuff is fantastic before or after a show.
And you can't go wrong at John's Pizza right across from the Majestic Theater on 44th Street. That is a quality pizza.
So Billy, actually right when we met you, there were a ton of autograph seekers waiting for the actors to come out. What is the respectful way to get a Broadway actor's autograph after a show?
Line up at our little barricades right there and have a pen ready with you, because you can't expect that they're gonna have a marker. Have your playbill ready, have something you want them to sign ready. Don't ask them to sign pictures of themselves or merchandise that you plan to turn around and sell on eBay. They know that's what you want to do, so don't do it. They're not gonna do it. Most folks will take a quick picture with you if they have a second. Not everyone does. At the end of the show, a lot of folks just need to get home. And not everyone always feels great at the end of the show, so you can't expect it. But most people will come out after and just have a quick moment with you. A lot of times, fans of the show will send us things backstage. They'll send things that they baked. We're not going to eat them. We can't say for sure who baked it and what's in it, so don't send food backstage. It's a lovely thing to do. We're going to end up throwing it out.
Billy, not only a Broadway veteran, but also a fellow YouTuber. Tell people about your channel.
That's right, I have my own personal channel. It's Billy Hipkins, the Also Ran, ALSORAN. I just talk on the daily most days about my New York life, either what's going on at my theater, what's going on at my apartment, what's going on with my two cats that drive me crazy and I love them to death. I just run my big mouth every day, and a lot of people seem to enjoy it, so tune in.
Today, I'll be sharing some NYC cheat codes that every tourist needs to know that I've learned after living here a dozen years. These will save you time, money, and a lot of headache. Here we go. I want to give a special thanks to Jolo for giving me the idea to make this video on a community tab post. Thank you so much. This cheat code starts the second you step off your flight and get ready to head to the city from any of the area airports. Have every single rideshare app downloaded on your phone. Lyft, Uber, and Revel. Revel is the newest, and that's where you ride in Teslas. And actually, I have a $20 off your first ride coupon right here. Feel free to use that. But a prime example, I was just at LaGuardia Airport 1 week ago. Every single person, it seemed, was trying to get an Uber. So a quick ride to Brooklyn for me would have cost over $100. With Revel, it was $45, but you can play around with this at all of the area airports. Always shop for the best fare. Another tip would be don't forget about taxis. At LaGuardia, for example, there was zero line for taxis, and I know it would have been way cheaper than taking an Uber. Same situation at JFK, $70 flat fare to get to Midtown Manhattan. If you see that your Uber is well over $100, don't be afraid to jump into a yellow cab. Extra bonus, you're riding in an icon of New York City. Ordering pickup instead of doing delivery on any of the food apps like Uber Eats or DoorDash. Let's say you're going back to your hotel, Airbnb, place an order for pickup and get it on the way home rather than paying all the extra fees for delivery with tips, etc. This is even something I do living in the city. If I'm within a 5-minute walk of any kind of pickup, I'll do that over delivery almost every single time. On the topic of placing pickup versus delivery,
How about skipping the line? At a lot of famous New York City eateries, placing your order in advance will save you 30 minutes or more. Prime example, Magnolia Bakery. My wife is obsessed with the banana pudding. She always, when we lived in the Village, used to place her order for pickup, cut the line, got the banana pudding, got right out of there. Same concept, Russ and Daughters, you want the famous Nova Scotia salmon, the scallion cream cheese bagel. You could do the same at Giuliana's or Grimaldi's in Brooklyn. Place your order in advance, skip the line, have some extra time to yourself. Going to your local bodega or deli, I've had many British viewers tell me this concept does not exist in the UK. Apparently 10% of you watching are from the UK. If I ever went to London and went to a pub, would you guys meet me? I'm curious. But yes, bodegas are the ultimate cheat code for locals in New York. Tourists don't go to them that often. For example, the other day, I got a $7 salad for lunch, which was humongous, filled me up. They've just gotten really popularized by people like the Aki Way, who did a video with him. They're insane sandwiches, but really any deli, any bodega in New York City for a cheap meal on the go that can actually be healthy, great cheat code. I can't take credit for all of these. We have some viewer submitted cheat codes which are great. Karen N said, always carry a water bottle with you. We got the best tap water in the world. Otherwise, be prepared to pay upwards of $7 to $8 for bottled water. Okay, unless it's like a liter of Fiji water, it's not gonna be $7 or $8. And I don't know if it's the best tap water in the world, but it is certainly drinkable, great tip, and also really good for the environment. Bobby in Blue with an absolute ingenious cheat code. If you're staying in the city and need something from Amazon, you can utilize one of the many Amazon pickup spots available all around the city. Amazon is fast in NYC. Put your order in at the start of the day, choose a pickup spot near your hotel or area you're headed to visit later in the day. Many times your items will be there in a few short hours. This is so true. Like if you forget almost any item from your home city or country, get it from Amazon real fast. Kelly Craven, if you can't get a reservation to a popular restaurant because they're all taken on your date, set an alert on Resy or Open Table. People tend to cancel once the date gets closer if you're flexible. Yes, if you have a certain Michelin-starred restaurant that you really want to go to and you only have one day to do it, put an alert on Resy. Very good tip. Only if you're an extreme type A personality, Mao Tao wrote, turn on notifications for weather apps so you know when rain is coming. You should check the weather forecast every morning anyway to see if there's any chance of rain or cold weather, but having notifications if rain is coming, I mean, that's interesting. I've mentioned this in so many videos, but unless you're taking the air train at JFK Airport, you don't need a Metro card anymore. If you have any kind of contactless payment on your cell phone, Omni, you just tap and go. Not really a cheat code, but a lot of people still don't know about this. This right here is the indication board. Now this is very useful if you're riding late at night and you want to be in the same subway car as the conductor. This is where they stop. Number two, if you want to ask the conductor a question about how to get to the next station, about if you're lost, also, you can chat with them. They'll be right here. Atlantic next? Yeah. I used to run into this all the time if I was taking the subway during rush hour, especially for express trains, if they're super packed like sardines, and you're not in a rush, you don't have a dinner reservation, Broadway show, wait 5 minutes for the next train. I guarantee you it's gonna be at least 25% less full. If you're a type A personality like me and you want to be as efficient as humanly possible when you take the subway, Citymapper will even tell you where to sit on the train to be closest to your exit. Might save you a minute or two, maybe 5 at a big station. I'm hiring child actors. I don't think I could afford these guys. So you love watching YouTube for information on New York. I appreciate your support on the channel, but I even watch other platforms for New York City creators. I think Instagram Reels is the best. There's so many creators on there doing all sorts of different stuff daily. Yes, they're making content daily. I don't know how they do it. Here's some accounts you should follow. Picture Perfect Luis, New York City for All, Marco's World NY, and the Bing Buzz. If you need that fresh dopamine infusion of New York City daily, just go to Instagram, follow them. You're gonna get so much cool information. I even get a lot of ideas from the stuff that they cover. I have never heard of a single tourist knowing this app But Too Good To Go is something that many locals go crazy over. It's an app where restaurants and cafes sell surplus food from the day at really cheap prices. I'm talking like $5 or $6. Your mileage may vary on how much you get, but I just put in Midtown Manhattan for today, and I saw meal options from salads to pizza, Italian, even grocery stores. So if you're on a budget and you're not picky and you want to have a little fun, try ordering lunch or dinner from Too Good To Go, and you will save a fortune. I promise you. If you want to avoid paying $45 for the Circle Line Sunset Cruise, which I think is worth it for many people, you want something quicker that'll still get the highlights on the East River, consider the NY Ferry for $4 in each direction alongside the East River. You'll still hit a lot of the icons like the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, seeing some of the skyline from the east side. A budget option that a lot of tourists have no idea about. Today, I'll be warning you about the biggest scams, ripoffs, and tourist traps in New York City that every visitor needs to know about. We even have some that I've never talked about before. Pay close attention. Here we go. Welcome to Times Square, ground zero for so many scams and ripoffs. The fake monk scam, and literally I see one walking right there as we film this. He will walk up to you and try to slap a bracelet on your wrist and try to solicit a donation for a Buddhist temple. Well, guess what? This temple doesn't exist. I don't even know if he's Buddhist, and you can get that bracelet probably for $1 around the corner. So best advice, like most of these scams, don't engage.
What's up, guys? You like hip-hop?
This has gotten so bad in Times Square that they actually have signs for it up. If you're handed a compact disc, it's free. Tipping is optional. We'll take it one step further. If anybody tries to hand you a CD, just don't take it. It is not worth the argument because the guys giving them out are going to expect money for one of their mixtapes. Sometimes they'll even try to autograph it for you to put extra pressure to get a donation. So my best advice, if anyone tries handing you a CD, just keep walking and don't make eye contact. Now, a lot of times around the city, especially in Times Square, you'll see groups of street performers, many times doing aerial acts, jumping over each other, trying to pump up the crowd, all fun. And they are going to expect tips, which is perfectly fine. They are giving you a performance, but where things get dicey is when they ask for volunteers and you volunteer to go in the middle of their show. Now, what some of my viewers have told me is they're gonna ask you quietly to give them $10, maybe $20 to ensure that they actually jump over your head. Again, no issue with this, but just know if you want your friends and family to film and take photos of this, if you want to be the center of attention, they are going to expect a tip, so don't be surprised. Speaking of video, most tourists realize that if you want to take a picture with Mickey Mouse or Elmo, they're going to ask you for a tip, maybe quite aggressively, but also if you're even walking by and start to film any of the costume characters, I have seen them get very upset, even with me, for filming and them being in the background. They may demand money from you. Remember, you have a First Amendment right to record whatever you want in public, but is it really worth the hassle to argue with these people? Probably not. Resort fees. I've never talked about it on the channel before, but so many of you have complained about it, and if you've never been to Las Vegas, a resort fee is basically any fee that a hotel tacks onto your bill to cover perks like free internet service, gym entry, access to the pool. Where it starts to get a little tricky is that a lot of third-party sites will put resort fee in small print at the bottom. So there's a big surprise when you check out that you're paying an extra $29 per night, and this gets a lot of people upset. You can try to avoid booking a hotel that has it, but I would just be extremely careful about reading the fine print, reading all the text when you book to see if the resort fee is included, so there's no surprise. There's a new scam in New York City, which is targeting senior citizens in all 5 boroughs, and I want all my tourists to know about it as well. The victim walks into the ATM vestibule and puts in their card, enter their PIN, and then a stranger comes behind them and puts a few dollars on the ground. The scammer's gonna tap you and say you dropped some cash, and then they are so quick, they'll switch your card out of the machine with a dummy card, take off with your card,
and go on a spending spree. I've also read that they are so sophisticated that they will stake out ATMs with surveillance gear, Bluetooth technology. It is very high-end crime going on in New York City right now at ATM machines. I want to warn especially my senior citizen viewers to be on the lookout for this. Another new scam that has been reported on the news in New York, we'll call this the candy scam. Some teens will approach you selling candy. Now, if you have cash, you'll just buy the candy. But if you don't have cash, they'll say it's fine, we can accept Venmo or Zelle Pay. And then instead of you putting in their phone number, they'll ask for your phone. And when they get your phone, you're gonna lose a lot of money, thousands of dollars coming out of your account. So the rule of thumb here, and the advice I give, is never give your phone to anybody if you're trying to donate money. If you're visiting New York for the first time and you need advice on itineraries, cheap eats, and so much more, check out our digital guides, link down in the description. I'm actually taking some of your suggestions here. Stephen Reese wrote, I had a guy try and sell me the hop-on, hop-off bus same day, about 20 minutes before they stopped operating. It happened a few days during my stay. Okay, nothing against the hop-on, hop-off buses, and this goes for any tour of New York. If someone's trying to sell you it, you should know what time it closes. Even an hour isn't enough time for one of those hop-on, hop-off buses. So if it's the end of the day and someone's trying to sell you a tour, make sure you know how much time you have left. Something else to be on the lookout for in Midtown are pedicabs, also in Central Park. Now, some of them are amazing guides to the city, but do not jump blindly onto a pedicab without agreeing to a price first, because many of them will charge $6, $7, $8 a minute. So after 20 or 30 minutes, you're basically paying for an airline ticket, okay? Broadway ticket ripoffs. This is something that so many tourists fall for. If you want to see any Broadway show, what you need to do to get tickets for it is go directly to that show's website. There's different ticket providers like Telecharge or Ticketmaster. And in this example here, we go to Aladdin and we find a show next week, May 23rd. Now on the official site, we jump to Ticketmaster. It starts at $64.50. But if you Googled Aladdin, you would find a website that looks official like this one, where you would see a start price of $106 a ticket, and they're barely showing you any inventory because these are ticket resellers, and you're gonna spend a lot more money if you go away from the primary source of tickets. You also have the ability to go to the TKTS booth if you want to get discounts for same-day shows, but for really popular shows or really busy times of year, always recommend pre-buying for your favorite show. Street food ripoffs and scams. I've mentioned this so many times, but if you ever go to a food vendor on the street and they do not have their prices listed, ask what the price is first before ordering. I've heard too many reports of my viewers paying $10, $20 for a hot dog. I wish I was making this up. So always check. You do not want to fall for this. Back to the viewers, the baggage tip hustle. Scammers outside the train terminal of Moynihan. People looking for a buck helping with luggage. He charged me 20 bucks just to carry the luggage into the terminal. Fortunately, the red caps were kind and patient. Thank you, Amtrak. Well, thank you, Enya, for this. I actually had something similar happen to me many years ago in Bridgeport, Connecticut. You may have some people trying to help you with your bags outside of a Moynihan train hall, a Port Authority right behind me, or a Penn Station. Don't let some stranger take your bags and expect that they're gonna do it for free. They will want a tip, okay? So be on the lookout for that. The bus, train, airport, stranded local scam. I see this happening all the time at the area transport hubs. Somebody's gonna walk up to you and say they are $7.25 short of their bus ticket up to Syracuse. And if you give them that money, they're gonna get home safely. They're gonna be in the same place, same time the next day, maybe going to a different city. So if anybody asks you for money to catch a bus or catch a train, no, they're doing it to everybody. The dropped food, bottle, medicine, glasses, you name it, scam. Somebody will be walking past you, in my case it was carrying French fries, and they very intentionally bump into you hoping that you didn't notice, dropping their food everywhere, dropping their prescription medicine everywhere, and demanding money from you right away. If this ever happens, keep it moving. Just keep walking. That's it. Don't engage. They're gonna look for a more gullible mark around the corner. You need to be on guard at any of the area airports the second you step outside of the terminal. If you don't have your ride arranged, somebody may approach you offering you a lift into Manhattan. Never accept any random livery cab driver's offer. They could really rip you off. The second is, I have seen it myself, people holding up signs that say Uber, trying to encourage you to go ride with them. They don't work for Uber. Every Uber must be called by the individual. They're just gonna give you a very expensive ride into the city. Filbert KM with this one. The scammers in Battery Park and around the Staten Island Ferry Terminal. Everyone should know the Staten Island Ferry is free and offers a pretty good view of the Statue of Liberty. Indeed it does, and indeed the Staten Island Ferry is always free. Never accept any offer trying to buy tickets for the Staten Island Ferry, and be careful of some of the people down there trying to sell, let's say, Statue of Liberty cruises or boat cruises. You can go directly to Castle Clinton or statuecruises.com to get the official tickets for the statue. So be on guard for that. Traveling to New York City as a first-timer can be so stressful. You have so much you want to see and so little time to do it. Today, I'm going to be sharing 10 mistakes you'll make in your first 3 days in New York City and how to avoid them. You don't want to miss it. Let's start from the very beginning, right after your plane arrives in New York City, and I got a lot of these mistakes from stuff you submitted on Facebook. Bought an unlimited AirTrain Metro card instead of the unlimited 7-day Subway Metro card. You know, until she submitted this, I didn't even know there was such a thing as an unlimited AirTrain card, but I guess it's for people that work at the airport. I don't even recommend buying an unlimited card anymore, and later in the video, I'll tell you why. But if you have to, make sure that you don't buy a $40 unlimited AirTrain ticket by mistake. We took the shuttle from the airport, which ended taking up almost 2 hours to get to our hotel on the Upper West Side. Could you imagine spending all this time planning for a trip? You get to New York and you're stuck in a shuttle for 2 hours because you're one of the last stops. I am not a fan of the airport shuttles. If you're flying into JFK and staying anywhere in Midtown Manhattan, my best advice is to take Long Island Railroad from Jamaica Station after you get off the AirTrain directly to Penn Station in under 20 minutes. It's $5 if you're not traveling during peak periods, a little bit over $10 if you are traveling between 6 to 10 a.m. Super convenient. My best advice is, if you have big checked bags, forget the shuttle, forget the train. Just take an Uber or a taxi, or better yet, try a Revel. These are Teslas that you can take directly from the airport. Use this code right here for $20 off your first ride. It's a little easier flying domestically from Cleveland or Pittsburgh and just hitting the ground running. Look, I've been there before. I've flown to Europe overnight. I know what jet lag feels like. You're excited, your first day in a new city, but New York moves fast. Maybe English isn't your first language, and a big mistake people make is overdoing it day one. While I'm not a big fan of it, the hop on, hop off buses, if you have to do it at some point during your trip, the first day would be the choice because you really don't have to do much. You just sit back. I even did it for the first time myself a couple of weeks ago. Another option would be the Circle Line cruise at night. That'd be the perfect first day activity, or even going to a Broadway show. Just don't overdo it your first day in New York. I don't know, taking too many subways, walking too much, you're gonna regret it, trust me. Over planning. My favorite moments in the city are the ones I wasn't planning on. My favorite moments in life are the moments I wasn't planning on. That's some Bruce Lee level advice there, which I have to agree with. Now, I'm not recommending you just show up to New York with no plan. I mean, you are watching this video, right? What I'm telling you not to do is planning every single moment, every single hour of every single day, because it is so easy to overestimate how much you can get done in one day as a tourist here. Do you know how long some of the lines are for the tourist attractions, for the observation decks? How a subway could be delayed, how one of your kids could be tired. I say you have a list of attractions and places to go that are must-dos, and everything else is a bonus. Because remember, New York City's not going anywhere. You can always come back.
While most of the tourists go to Dumbo to see the sights and the skyline, going to the Brooklyn Heights Promenade is a lot more local, and the views, well, I mean, speak for themselves. I want to eat a famous hot dog, but the seller asked me if I wanted a special one. Special for me. I agreed, and he placed inside salad and lots of beep and cashed me $14. My fiance got normal plain one with mustard for $3 and was amazing. So get a normal, not extra. I don't know what it is about some of the Midtown hot dog and food vendors, but many of them don't have prices listed. And this is not a knock on street food vendors because New York has so many honest ones. My tip for you is if you're ordering from any vendor in New York City whose prices aren't listed, ask for the price first. I've seen it firsthand where I forget to ask what the price is, and suddenly a small bottle of water is charged at $3 and not $2. It adds up. Don't fall for this little hustle. If you want to know other scams to avoid, we just released our new guides. I have a free one linked down below that'll tell you all the biggest scams in New York City to look out for. We've also got itineraries, food guides. Give it a look. These guides are a lifesaver. Our first 2 times visiting, we made the mistake of not utilizing a subway. We walked and used the hop-on, hop-off bus. Had we just used the subway, we would have been able to get everywhere a lot more efficiently and do more. There's a lot of fear lately surrounding the New York City subway. I totally understand that, but learning how to use the subway, even for short trips from Midtown to Battery Park in about 10 minutes, think about how much time you would save rather than having to walk 40 or 50 blocks. Because I've been reading about tourists in these Facebook groups. They are walking everywhere because they're afraid of taking the subway. I take the subway a couple times a week. Now, I'm not telling you to take it late at night by yourself, but during normal hours, I think it's totally fine to do so. And the tourists that do end up taking the subway, most of them realize that a lot of the fear surrounding it was just overhyped by the media. It's dirty, you may run into some characters down there, but for efficiency and connectivity, New York City subway Manhattan is really tough to beat. I knew better, but swiped into the wrong direction train station at a stop that had separate uptown and downtown entrances. There was an unlimited card, so I had to wait 18 minutes to get on the train going the correct direction. All right, we got a few subway mistakes to go over. One is not realizing that some New York City stations have separate entrances for uptown and downtown, and if you swipe into the wrong direction, you have to leave, exit across the street, and go to the other entrance. The big stations in the city, you're not gonna run into this, but it is good to know for some of the smaller ones. The second mistake here, I think most people do not need to buy unlimited Metro cards anymore. If you have one of these, a smartphone, and it has the ability to do contactless payment, any iPhone, any Android, you can use what's called OmniPay. You just open up your wallet, put it right up to the machine, and you swipe in. Here's the best part. After you take 11 rides between Monday to Sunday on the same device using Omni, the rest of your rides are free, just like having an unlimited card. So if you think you're gonna use it that often, keep using your phone and it'll become unlimited anyway. Never get into an empty carriage on the subway thinking you've lucked out because all the others are full. There's a reason it's empty. You only make this mistake once. I'm gonna take this one step further because I agree. If a train car is really crowded and there's a row of seats that are surprisingly open, there's usually a reason for that too. When you make a list of sites to see, restaurants, etc., and you make up your itinerary, try to keep things in the same area so you're not going uptown to do 1 or 2 things, and downtown for food, then midtown to do something else. That is excellent advice. New York City, really, you could break up Manhattan into 3 segments: uptown, midtown, and downtown. It is smart to plan a lot of your activities in one area, or what you could do if you're staying in midtown, start your day downtown, do everything in lower Manhattan that you want to get done, and then head back to midtown at the end if there's something that you want to check off. But being aware of where attractions and restaurants are, grouping attractions together by neighborhood is a really smart and logical idea. We just shot a video about tourist traps in Times Square, and we ate at the Olive Garden.
It was the first time I've eaten in the Olive Garden since living in New York City for about 11 years. I'll tell you that I could close my eyes and walk in any direction from Times Square and probably find a better restaurant than the freaking Olive Garden. I think eating at chain restaurants for tourists, typically what it comes down to is laziness. You see something that you recognize and you want to eat there. I understand that if you're not adventurous, but if you want to experience more of New York City, there's a lot of local spots in Midtown Manhattan. Go through my videos, my guides, go through Google reviews. New Yorkers are very harsh critics. If a place has been around for a while and they have a very high mark, generally a reason for that. I'll warn you though, be careful with TripAdvisor because that's tourists' opinions. You want to get local opinions. Cash only food places. I'm not used to taking out cash for anything, so it really caught me off guard when I wanted a slice and couldn't get it. Many tourists overlook this. Always have cash on you. I'll give you a story. Last week, I was right around here in Brooklyn Heights. I went to a new halal truck, $18. Didn't take credit card. Luckily, I had cash on me. You'll see this issue at some pizza places, and then there's delis, bodegas who have credit card minimums, so you're gonna be forced to buy extra stuff. If you just want a $1 water, always have cash, save yourself the hassle. You might find some pizza spot that's absolutely amazing, and you'll be disappointed when you have to run to an ATM. Number 10, stick around for a bonus after. Trying to stay up after 8 p.m. once you walk 20 miles a day, it kills you. It was my first ever trip outside the UK, by the way. As someone that used to travel a lot when I was single and I wanted to go out at night, I made sure to have some kind of a break in the middle of the day. I wouldn't go walking 10 miles in Amsterdam and expect to have energy to go on some kind of a pub crawl later on. So if you're somebody that wants to go out to a jazz club, a nightclub, a bar, whatever it may be, pace yourself during the day. And pacing yourself in general is gonna keep you from burning out and not feeling like you experienced anything in New York. If you're just running from point A to point B, you're gonna get so tired. Don't be afraid to take a nap midday, to take a shower. Just take little breaks every now and then. Recharge your phone, recharge yourself. Ready for this bonus? This was too funny to leave out. Letting my sons convince me to drive them across every bridge several times within a week. Hashtag big toll bills. I don't own a car anymore. I'm gonna let Ben handle this one. Ben, you are the expert on paying high toll bills. What's your suggestion for tourists who want to drive?
Yeah, so driving is very tricky because not only you have to consider the expensive cost of parking, you also have to consider the tolls. And to put you in perspective, I used to pay $30 a month when I was not in New York, and after moving here, I now pay $170 at least monthly on my Easy Pass just on tolls.
So if people want to do sightseeing on the bridges, what should they do? They should maybe walk the Brooklyn Bridge?
Yeah, you should definitely just walk or take a city bike or just watch a live streamer go through the Brooklyn Bridge.
Watch Action Kid.
Watch Action Kid. It's the same experience without costing you that much.
Whenever you visit a new place, there's always certain attractions that everybody says you have to go to. Today, we'll take a look at New York's most famous tourist activities and see if they're overrated or not. You don't want to miss it. Since this topic is so debatable, I need another New York City YouTuber. We have Sarah Funk, who also gives tours, the perfect co-host.
Hey John, I'm ready to get going. Let's do this.
Let's rock. We call something overrated. It doesn't mean it's a bad attraction. We just think it's a little overhyped.
Totally agree.
So we'll start with maybe the most famous attraction in New York City, the Empire State Building. And it pains me to say this, but I think it's overrated. Now, if you are a fan of buildings, Art Deco style was the tallest building in the world for many years. I think it's great. But if you're a fan of just pure observation decks, I think that the bars on the actual observation deck make it a little bit difficult to see things versus some of the other observation decks. What do you think?
Listen, I sadly agree with you on this, but I do have a thing to say about it. I would say it's not the best view in the city. Why? Because that iconic view of New York has the Empire State Building in it. And what happens if you're in the Empire State Building, John?
You can't see the Empire State Building.
Correct, that's the problem there. But the interior, they have a really cool exhibit. I like that about it, but I would say overall overrated. But if you're strictly there for the view, I would say go to another observation deck.
I'd say for just a pure observation deck experience, I'd say Top of the Rock for views.
100% agree on that.
This is one that a lot of tourists even tend to agree with me on. Times Square, I think it's totally overrated. I think it's worth visiting once in your life. I mean, I go a few times a year because of filming or going to Broadway shows. It's absolutely overcrowded. Every scam in New York City's hub is Times Square. I know it's iconic and you should go, but I think it is completely overrated.
Listen, I'm gonna say something scandalous right now.
All right.
And I think it's not overrated. Okay, I know that's crazy, but here's why. There's nowhere else on the planet like Times Square. Nowhere, okay? Times Square is totally one of a kind, a commercial disaster explosion.
Well, what about Tokyo? Similar.
I haven't been there, so it doesn't count.
Okay, it doesn't count.
You can't come to New York and not do Times Square, John.
I didn't tell him not to go, I just said it was overrated.
You can't, yes, but it's part of the reason why I say it's not overrated, because I feel like you gotta go there once to get the photo.
Fair. Statue of Liberty, I'm gonna say not overrated if you go inside the Crown, which is one of the coolest things I have ever done in New York City for $24, the same price as going to the pedestal. Look, I understand you can see the Statue of Liberty from the Staten Island Ferry, from all the boat cruises, but going inside the Crown, no, definitely not overrated.
That's really cool, and I've never done that, but I actually do consider the Statue of Liberty overrated, which it pains me to say a bit, because in a way it is an icon of New York. It's what notified those immigrants that came over from all over the world that they're in New York City. It welcomed them. But I've never been to the Crown, and unless you're going to the Crown, maybe, I don't know, I don't think it's worth it. Why? Because exactly the point you made, which is you can see it beautifully from a boat. I do recommend Classic Harbor Line. It's a much more luxurious experience and only slightly more expensive than those super packed boats that you see on the harbor. On the other hand, most visits to the Statue of Liberty include Ellis Island, which I think is an amazing experience. Actually, you can find where you're past it.
I think it's not overrated also because it includes Ellis Island. Like, I wouldn't tell someone just go to Ellis Island. I would say stop at the statue.
Yeah.
But I understand your point. You could just see it. Depends what kind of tourist you are.
Yeah.
But do the Crown. Do the Crown. Book it a month or two in advance.
Just a month? That's good.
You've heard longer.
I mean, I tried to book it a while ago and they were like 6 months.
No, now it's not so bad.
Okay. I haven't been, so listen to John with that one. What's the next one?
Madame Tussauds. This one, I think, is the easiest in the video to call overrated. Maybe, just maybe, if there was only one Madame Tussauds in the entire world, I would change my opinion. But the fact is, there's 30 of them. It is on every single New York City attraction pass, so it's always super mobbed. And I feel like there's tourists that go there that they'll never take the New York City subway, but they'll just check out the replica. You'll see replicas of New York in there. You should be outside actually experiencing things. It's not LA, we're not a celebrity-driven city.
I agree, 100% overrated. Why? Similar reasons to John. Really, there's no point in going there, it's all over the world. My theory is, if you're coming to New York, you should do things in New York City that you can't do anywhere else, and you can do Madame Tussauds in like a gazillion places. So skip it and save your money, it's not
The
worth
Brooklyn
it.
Bridge. This is a New York City icon. This one pains me, but I'm gonna say it's overrated. I'm gonna say it's overrated, not for the reasons you may think. I mean, it's an architectural wonder. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world. I'm calling it overrated for two reasons. One, it is always super crowded unless you go at dawn or, I don't know, at night later on. And the second reason is because you can't see the Brooklyn Bridge from the Brooklyn Bridge, but I actually love the Manhattan Bridge Walk where you can stare at the Brooklyn Bridge. I think you should do it. I just think it's a bit overhyped.
All right, I'm about to possibly blow your mind here, John. I disagree. I do not think it's overrated, and here's why. Yes, it is crazy crowded, but there's a way to do it now that they just opened that's not crazy crowded. They just opened a bike lane underneath and there's like no one on that. So you can actually cross it now in peace without a gazillion people like in your face, and it's a great experience. The other thing I think is nice about the Brooklyn Bridge is it's a classic view of the city. You don't have to be on it to appreciate it. Is that what your point is? You have to be on it? Is that the key thing?
My point is doing that Brooklyn Bridge walk that everybody does.
The classic walk.
I think it can be overrated. Just the walk, not taking a picture next to it.
Okay, I think you can do it as on the bike. I would say do it on the bike. Don't walk it. I
That's
agree
a great
with,
point. I didn't even think about that.
They just opened the bike lane.
Okay.
So originally the bike lane was where all the walking was, and it was absolute chaos and hell.
If you're watching this video and you're visiting New York for the first time, check out my Thatch guides, linked down below. We have everything from itineraries, where to eat, where to go, a big help, linked down below in the description. Central Park.
Oh.
I'm gonna say not overrated, even though I've lived in Brooklyn the last 3 years and everyone says Prospect Park is better. Everyone says it was Olmsted's masterpiece after designing Central Park, but guess what? No parks have that kind of cityscape view and are that iconic and are that big to have so many things going on. I know it's super touristy. You can find little pockets in the park that are peaceful, so many adventures to be had, near some of the best museums in the city. Not overrated.
I completely agree. Absolutely not overrated. And whoever said Prospect Park is better is insane to me.
Brooklyn people have told me that.
That's what? They just say that because they love Brooklyn, and I'm all about that, like loving your borough thing. But saying it's Olmsted's masterpiece, in many ways, Central Park is a masterpiece in itself. It was actually designed to look like the great paintings in Europe, and that's why when you take a picture there, it literally looks like you're in a fairyland.
Oh, totally.
It's absolutely worth it.
The Met. I am gonna 100% say it is not overrated. It is one of the most expensive museums in the city at $30 unless you're a New York resident, but they have works of art in there that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. It is one of the best attractions in the city that you could spend an entire day and not even scratch the surface of. I have met very few people that have ever went to the Met and said they had a bad experience.
100% agree, absolutely not overrated. It is the best art museum in the city by far. And in fact, in the video you popped up in recently about New York in 2023, I talk about how they're going to have 2 of Van Gogh's most famous pieces on display together in the Met Museum this year. So they're always doing new things. They also have the fabulous Met Gala, hello. I mean, listen, that's just a situation, a moment in itself.
And the rooftop bar has some amazing views of Central Park.
It
Little
does.
bonus.
Yeah, I think it's the best views of Central Park from above that you can really get. There's no rooftop bars that really show it like that, except for the Met. The drinks are overpriced and not worth the money.
That's
but
overrated. The drinks on the rooftop
crap.
of the Met is what's overrated.
But did you know you don't actually have to get a drink there? You can just go up there.
Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, I'm going to say overrated because for one, it is super crowded almost the entire time that it's up. And 2, I don't even think it's the best Christmas tree in the city. I've liked the Lotte Palace's tree better on certain years. I feel like the Rockefeller tree, it looks the same every single year and it's just packed with first-time tourists. So I think you should see it from afar, but I don't think you need to spend too much time elbowing your way in just to get that one good picture.
I agree, it's overrated. It's just too crazy. It's absolute chaos there. It's not worth it. But if you're gonna go there, stop by real quick, see the tree from afar and see the Saks Fifth Avenue light show, and then get out of there. It is absolute chaos though. Crowds beyond anything I've ever seen in the city.
The High Line, I'm going to say not overrated. For one, it's free. It's also one of the most touristy things in New York that I actually enjoy doing over and over again when I'm actually in the area. I mean, you have art displays up there, you're above the city, you feel like you can spy down on people. It has a good history. It used to be railroad tracks. I love how they converted it. I like where it starts, over in the meatpacking district, walk the whole thing, bam, you're at the Vessel, you're at Hudson Yards, so it's the perfect trek for a tourist. I'm a fan.
I also agree, it's totally not overrated. The best time to do it is in the spring when all the flowers are blooming. It does tend to get crowded, so I would recommend doing it right when they open or right before they close, actually. Right before they close, a lot of people aren't there every time I've gone.
What time, like 6, 7?
Their hours of closing changes depend on when the sun sets. So you want to go, like, in my opinion, right before they close or right when they open.
And you could stop at Chelsea Market. Let's talk as #1. I know you're a fan, right?
Yes, big fan. Which used to be the Nabisco factory, which is where they made Oreos, which I'm also a huge fan of.
Fun fact, I grew up in Fairlawn, New Jersey, home to the Nabisco factory. Driving on the highway, I would smell the cookies,
Wow, that's tempting. I don't know if I could handle that every day.
Times Square has more tourist traps than any other spot in New York City. You know, the kinds of places where locals only go if they've got friends or family visiting. Today, I'm gonna be checking out as many of these places as possible to see what the hype's about.
Madame Tussauds, the world's most famous wax museum, 26 different locations, and an admission charge of $47. Every time I've ever walked by here, it's jam-packed. Never thought I'd actually go in, but today, we're gonna make it happen. This is pretty much the most touristy thing you could possibly do in New York City. I mean, I'll put this as #1. After I've seen the movie House of Wax, I could never look at one of these again and not think that he's real. I'm tired of seeing all these mainstream celebrities here. Where are the YouTubers? Wait, that looks just like Action Kid, another New York City live streamer, but I thought he moved to Miami. How did he get a wax dummy here? He's so lifelike. Wait, he has a microphone? Is it on? He's alive. How did you get here?
Madame Tussauds hired me. This reminds me of like the emojis from iPhone.
You know, Jimmy, funny story. I actually wasn't planning on being a YouTuber. This stuff happened by accident.
You know, Wendy, I moved to Miami and it was a big mistake. It's boring there, it's all everything but the beach.
So this is the closest you'll probably ever see Obama and Trump again.
Well, this is cool, man. I mean, you got the actual New York City subway staircase, the tiling, the lettering for the subway. Can't get any better than this.
Hi. This is just like a completely manicured world of New York. Like you could actually just go out and experience it yourself too if you want. This guy's hiding here.
Oh my gosh.
Evil subway worker. Why is he over there in the corner like that?
Some crazy special effects here.
So tall. So my issue with this spot is that it's just a lot of tourists who buy those attraction passes and they just check off all the lists of places they have to go. It was interesting, but for New York City, I think there's so many more authentic places you could go to for 2 hours. Every single New York City tourist trap in one block.
Oh, wow.
Bubblegum shrimp. I never in a million years thought I'd actually be eating here. Based off one of my favorite movies ever, Forrest Gump. Their fictional company became a national restaurant chain, and that happy hour is calling my name. Let's see if we can turn a tourist trap into a little hidden gem. All right. Feels like I'm entering Applebee's. I'll do a margarita. You want a margarita? 1 garlic bread, 1 popcorn shrimp, 1 Bubba's dip.
Yeah, I'll get those started for you.
Let's do it. I don't know how much alcohol is in here, but for $5, I was expecting half cup size here. Cheers. That's not bad, actually. I do think it's a little bit maybe diluted, but.
Popcorn shrimp.
All right, here.
Gotcha. How about the dip?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
I got it. Action, you ready? Let's try this?
Yeah, let's try it.
Bubblegum shrimp, the namesake. We gotta try some popcorn shrimp.
Popcorn shrimp.
$6 happy hour. Ready? That's not bad.
Oh,
It's not bad at all.
this is actually pretty good.
I'm surprised.
Good amount of shrimp in there.
You know, if you're stuck in Times Square for whatever reason, between 3 and 6 p.m. during the weekdays, this is a pretty interesting deal.
Oh, it's fresh, full of spinach and tomatoes. Not bad. For the price, $6. If I was in Times Square for a long period of time and didn't know where else to eat, this is a decent place to come.
So if you're watching this and you're planning a trip to New York and you're wondering what's not a tourist trap in Times Square, we actually just released new guides to New York City. We've got a dedicated Times Square Midtown guide, a mix of attractions and places where you may be the only tourist. They've got maps, audio guides, written blurbs. I curated all of it, 50% off, limited time only. See the link down below in the description. It's like having me in your back pocket. I think the butt of every Times Square joke is saying eat at the Olive Garden. Well, that's exactly what we're about to do. There's over 900 of these in the United States. This is the only location in Manhattan. It's kind of iconic that it happens to be right in Times Square. We got a 15-minute wait for the Olive Garden at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday. This is exciting. I've never taken an escalator to go into an Olive Garden before. I used to dine at the Olive Garden when I lived in New Jersey. Little known fact, before I was adventurous with life. By sheer luck, we have gotten the corner table where I can see Times Square, and if this was New Year's Eve, I could even see the ball drop from here. People would pay probably $1,000 for this table on December 31st.
This is amazing, man. That's probably the best view of Times Square right here.
We were just completely unoriginal. We literally ordered off the front pictures. Tour of Italy, chicken Alfredo, chicken and shrimp carbonara.
Yeah, real original, but let's see how they taste.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I haven't had an Olive Garden breadstick since Obama was president. Right.
Okay.
It tastes exactly the same. Exactly the same.
I think it's pretty good. It's got butter on it, crunchy.
I read a cool fact about the Olive Garden. They give you one more breadstick than amount of people in your table, so we got 4. Because they had a problem with too many people wasting breadsticks.
Tastes like airplane food.
First class or coach airplane food? There's a distinction there.
Business class airplane food.
Okay.
That's what it tastes like.
We got my chicken Alfredo. I don't know if it's really promising just looking at this. Kind of questioning what life decisions led me to this moment, but here we are at the Olive Garden, Times Square. Let me try a little chicken, a little Alfredo sauce, a little pasta. You know what? Chicken's actually not as dry as I thought it was going to be from the looks of it. At least the view's nice, huh? It's the Olive Garden. Yeah.
There's a chicken and shrimp carbonara. I gotta mix everything in here. Shrimp wasn't as good as Bubba Gump's. It was a little bit more mushy. Chicken, the same, but at least it's not dry compared to what John's. I'd rather have my dish than John's.
I think my issue with this is it has like no personality. It just tastes like a chain restaurant's pasta. I'm not trying to bash Olive Gardens nationwide because I know there are many fans of the Olive Garden. I just think that the New York culinary scene is so deep and diverse that even in Midtown, you can find a lot of interesting restaurants. And this is the tourist equivalent of seeing the Golden Arches for fast food. Like, oh, Olive Garden, we have that back home. I know what that is.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with you, John. There's a lot better options here than Olive Garden and Times Square for sure.
I'm trying to think if I've had a worse Italian meal in New York. I said I didn't before, now I'm starting to reconsider that statement. I can't think of what was worse.
Olive Garden.
I'm sorry. I will give them a big compliment. They had super fast and efficient service, so the waiters and the staff were fantastic here. The food at the Olive Garden is the way the food at the Olive Garden always is. There is something special about Times Square when the sun sets, really.
Anybody in the mood for Halloween early? Oh. I smell candy all over the place right now.
Smells like candy, yeah.
It smells like sugar in here.
I've been to the M&M store a few times with Adriana. This is a tourist trap that's actually kind of cool. This isn't something you can find every day, and I think they have cool souvenirs here. Plus, look at all these flavors. I don't think you're gonna find this in your random street corner in Pennsylvania.
I know, even from a chain store like CVS, those M&M packets, how many flavors are gonna have, honestly? You know?
Oh, look at the Statue of Liberty. 1995. Cool souvenir. Oh boy, he fell. Well, every time Action Kid's in my video, he drops something. And it's not the first time Action Kid has dropped something on my video.
Oh shoot. Folks.
We really cannot take this guy anywhere.
It's the microphone cable. Dragging off someone's backpack strap.
Really useful tip, on the 3rd floor, one of the rare public bathrooms in all of Times Square.